Board of Equalization first.
Oh, we do? Okay, thank you.
And I've already signed knowing.
All right, welcome. If we can get everybody to come in, settle down. Hopefully for as short as meetings we had last week, right? Just kidding, just kidding. Welcome this morning. We are going to start with a Board of Equalization meeting first. And on the agenda for this Board of Equalization meeting, we have to approve the Board of Equalization Assessor Approved Review Process Report. And is there any questions on that? Nope. Commissioners, I don't have any questions as well, so a motion would be in order.
Move that we approve regular agenda item 1.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 1 on the Board of Equalization's report. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn the Board of Equalization. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That also passes 3-0. That was as quick as last week.
Yeah, we're done.
Okay. Now, if we'll just take 1 second, we'll change. We have to record these, and we have to get on the right recording button. So if we'll just take 1 second. Okay, welcome to our Board of County Commissioners, County Commission meeting this morning. And as always, we would like to start with a prayer, a reading, or a thought, and then have somebody lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And we're looking for volunteers who would be willing to participate with us if you just come up and state your name as well. Are there any volunteers for a prayer, reading, or thought?
In the back corner.
Which one? I got 2 hands up here, but I can do the auction thing between you two.
That Elvin?
Elvin, you got the prayer? Okay, very good. Thank you. Prayer first.
Our Father in heaven, we thank Thee that we're able to be here this morning. We ask Thee that we might be able to accomplish good things today. Bless the commissioners. Bless each one of us as citizens, that we might be able to do our part. Please bless us to be respectful, to be honest, to be earnest in all that we do today. Please bless us, Heavenly Father, that we might be able to understand our commitments, our responsibility as citizens. We ask for these things. We ask Thee to bless those who are in need throughout our country today, those from Texas, and those others that are worried and impending that might be in harm's way. We ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just for the record, could we get your name?
Rich Bowman.
Thank you.
W-M-A-N.
Thanks, Rich. All right, let's, Commissioner Ivey, let's just start right off.
Yep. So county fairs have long been an American tradition, and very recently here in Utah County, we just finished up an extremely successful Utah County fair where we saw significant increased numbers in our exhibitors and participants, as well as an exciting concert and demolition derby and other events. With that in mind, it becomes very fitting that today we honor our latest Utah County Employee of the Month, Trish Thorne. Trish, if you want to come up. So Trish works for us in the USU Extension Office, and this is what her office had to say about her. They said, Extension handles all of the 4-H exhibits and fully supports the youth livestock activities at the fair. Beyond that, Trish has the responsibility to orchestrate the open class exhibits, including the popular Kids Corner. When Trish agreed to become the chairperson of our open class committee at the Utah County Fair, we had experienced long wait lines, problems with registration, and any number of concerns with registering and displaying the approximately 3,200 items from Utah County citizens throughout the valley. She took the challenge head on. Our open class has grown significantly each year, and those lines have reduced. This year, we had approximately 300 more citizens share their talents and projects than last year. Trish directs the physical setup of display space for more than 2,600 exhibits. She arranges for exhibit division chairs and dozens of other volunteers to complete judging and ribbon placement. Trish not only streamlined and organized the registration process, but looked at ways we could better involve the citizens of our county in the fair. Trish began what has become known as the Kids Corner at the county fair. Over the past 4 years, 2,500 to 3,000 kids each year have participated in the fun and games at the county fair Kids Corner organized by Trish. She manages other helpers who provide the fun things for young fairgoers to do, from face painting to beanbag tosses. And she sues the disappointed dad whose child got a red ribbon for the painted rock they exhibited, and claims the agitated canner who insists that her bread and butter pickles were just as good as Aunt Vivian's. Mike Stansfield, County Fair Director, said, quote, "Trish contributions help make the fair happen. I couldn't do it without her." Dean Miner, Extension County Director, added, "Mike, you're right. You couldn't run the fair without her." Trish's organizational abilities and love of the Utah County Fair has enhanced the fair experience for untold numbers of Utah County citizens. Trish is a key contributor all year long. She collects and edits materials for the popular Garden Help Desk column that the Extension has in the Provo Daily Herald. She is the first line of communication with the dozens of teachers who bring thousands of second graders to farm field days, and she is well known for the extra efforts she gives to help less proficient English speakers through the food safety manager's certification process they need in order to keep their restaurants open. Trish does a lot of things to help a lot of people and deserves all of the accolades given to her today by doing so. We are honoring all of the wonderful fair volunteers who made the 2017 County Fair a wonderful success. Thank you, Trish.
If you'd like, we'd like to give you these, but if you'd like to say something, you definitely can. I just wanted to say one thing, because you had us go around and do judging for the what did they call that? It was the fair, no, Best of Fair. Best of Fair. That was harder than I thought it was going to be, because the talent was so. I looked at things and thought, oh, maybe I should judge this based on how many hours I think they put into doing this, and that got really hard. But thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you. I have enjoyed growing the fair, because when I first went, open class was really slow, and I thought, you know, what can I do to make this more fun for kids? And that's when I started the Kids Corner. And we keep 6 booths going the whole time. We have a photo booth and a beanbag toss and just all kinds of fun stuff. But just to see kids happy, to see the volume of people, you know, going through, it's been really gratifying. So,
Thank you.
thank you for this. Appreciate it.
Got goodies for you too.
So there's your plaque. The goodies are in the envelope, so don't lose it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Turn the smile. Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, just a couple of housekeeping items. Hopefully you had a chance to sign in back there as you came in. If you didn't, would you please sign in as you go out? Also, with a large group like this and having items on our agenda in which there's a lot of different opinions, if you would, as we get to the agenda item, hopefully you have an agenda with, or you know where we're at. As we get to that agenda item, come on up and state your name, and that way we can have a record of who's speaking, and so everyone's welcome for that. And then if you're here for just general comments, besides items that are not on the agenda, that will be at the end. So if you've got an agenda item that you'd like to speak to, you can come on up at that time. We will now look at our consent agenda, and we have, let's see, we got quite a bit. We got 29 consent agenda items. And of those, I'd like to see number 8 held, number 12. And those are the only 2 that I would like to see held. Are there any others that we can pull off of consent?
I didn't have any.
No, I just want to make the same comment on consent agenda item 2, that that's probably with overtime employees, man hours at the sheriff's department, so we need to continue to look at that calculation since sheriff's here. So
On which item?
on consent agenda 2, just like
Oh.
it always happens, but
Oh,
want to make,
yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I catch up here.
yeah.
Okay, so we have those 2 that we're pulling off of consent for discussion. And now we'll look at our regular agenda. Our regular agenda has a number of items on it as well. We will, at this point, assume that everything goes on consent, except for what we are gonna pull off. I would like to see number 2 held. Number 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11. Are there any others that,
Those are actually the ones I had, so.
okay, so, and then everything else will go on consent to be either approved, authorized, adopted, as stated on the agenda item itself. Is there any questions to those that we put on consent?
On number 12 on the regular agenda, that is the addendum to the DEFCO agreement.
Right?
That one, you should approve it as contingent upon receiving funding through the state, through Quarter Preservation Bank.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably gonna be 2 to 3 weeks before we get that for sure, but it's in the process right now. Is that correct, Richard? So if you could prove it
Okay.
contingent upon that.
If you're fine with doing that,
I'm
Commissioners?
fine with that.
Okay, we'll put that contingency on there, on number 12. Approved with that. Okay. Is there any comments to the items that we put on the consent? Okay. We'll go back then with number 8. And this one's hopefully a simple one. As I was reading down through it, I saw that there was a comment on there about the price, and the price didn't match. You know, I looked at the agreement again, and the price still didn't match on the documentation, so I don't know who's gonna speak to this one. There was a quote, and then there was, in the documentation, there was a different number, and so I'm wondering what
I know-
number we're looking at.
I know that he got several different bids. The winning bid, or the lowest bid was Restaurant Supply. Because of the price, we had to get a contract written up, and Court has done that. Restaurant Supply.
I think what happened was I look at the contract that's on there, or the bid that's on there, and the bid is different than what I see in the, and I think Robert,
Is that the $13,000 one?
that's the $13,000 one, yes.
Yeah, we,
There's like a 666 one versus a 230 something.
yeah, that was brought to my attention, and we do have a corrected, at Court Griffin County Attorney's Office, that was brought to my attention, and we do have a corrected, document to be uploaded to the agenda.
Okay, so we just don't,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm fine with approving that if the number is the number that the bid was submitted for.
Correct.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I will move that we approve consent agenda item number 8, contingent upon the dollar amounts matching the contract in the bid.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second to approve and authorize the agreement as stated, number 8, with the stipulation of the numbers matching the bid amount. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. All right. Okay, number 12 is an agreement with Utah Valley Convention Center for our employee appreciation holiday party. This is one where I put a comment on there, and every once in a while you put a comment on there, and it feels like it goes into a black hole. Now, I realize that I've been gone for a week, so maybe it's my fault that the communication didn't happen. But I put a comment on there that the amount that we're putting on there is larger than our estimate, plus our information from last year and the amount of how many individuals actually showed up. And so that was just my concern, was that our number for $24,000 doesn't really match where we're at. It was more of a discussion.
I think that's the amount we budget, if I remember right, Brian?
Yeah.
So the contract, it's weird, which it's our own contract with our own entity.
Yeah, I know.
But we always put it in for the whole amount, even though there's a true up for the exact amount of what we do. So I don't know why we do it that way either.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I don't have a problem with approving it that way, probably with the stipulation that we look at,
We won't be
actual
spending
cost.
$24,000.
Right,
Yeah.
we'll spend whatever the actual is.
Unless
but we
every
budget
employee
that
finally
because
shows up.
We have that in there in case everybody decides to come, and then we're covered, and if they decide not to, we'll go through the true-up process and have it worked out.
I think as I was reading down through it, even if all 800 showed up, that we weren't gonna hit the.
No, but I mean, we have
24.
more employees than
Yeah.
that. It just,
Yeah.
if they all showed up. Of course,
Okay.
if they all showed up,
It would have
we need to
have a dinner problem.
we-
Okay. So I just wanted to have that conversation so I'm fine with approving
Okay,
that,
and I
understanding that.
Move that we approve consent agenda item 12.
Second?
We got a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 12. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay. And that takes us all the way through consent agenda. Okay, now on number 2, that's listed as regular agenda, we have the duties, updating the duties of the Utah County Investment Benefits Committee. And thanks for the work on this, Dave. I just wanted to read one part of this. And I don't know how many employees are here or how many are maybe watching online. It's 3.4. As we're working down through this,
On the modified or?
on the modified,
Okay.
yes, the modified version.
Okay.
It talks about that this group, this committee is a recommending committee, and then it comes back to the commission for final approval. But the one point that I wanted to just emphasize was 3.4, and participants at the meeting says the IBC, which is that committee, meetings shall be open to all participants of the plan and their beneficiaries, and the IBC shall take reasonable action to provide notice to participants of the IBC meeting. What that means is that anyone who is receiving this benefit, an employee or the beneficiary, if they'd like to come up and listen and see what's going on in that meeting, because it is their funds, it's their money that is being used as we look at this. I just wanted to point that out so that all employees know that meeting is open for them to come, look at, participate in. And so I just wanted to point that out as we work through this process. Any other thoughts or?
So I did have one particular thought on this. When this was originally enacted, we had the names of the individuals and their positions that were making up the body. The latest version doesn't have positions, and I would be of the thought process, it would be good to at least have some of the positions defined by title, so that we ensure that we have someone from the attorney's division on there. I think that's good to have the legal oversight, maybe the treasurer, someone with financial expertise, so that we're defining not individuals, but a position to be on there, and then leaving some of the others up for more flexibility for appointment, to get a good balance if we have someone who wants to be on the board that has, an interest or expertise in that area. They're not restricted because they're not listed, so we have some flexibility, but we built into it some consistency in positions being appointed that we feel are relevant to the board.
Yeah, and I felt the same. When I first saw that list, the last list, it had title and name.
Yeah, the name was
which locked it
problematic.
in. And my first thought was, let's just take the names off, leave the titles on. And I think we have to remember that this board serves at our discretion,
Right.
at the commission's discretion. And so I think at any time we could change it to whomever if we felt that it was out of balance. So I can see.
My question would just be, as we change, if that just gives the board consistency as it moves forward.
Well,
Have somebody from that position.
the only thing is like by law, the treasurer doesn't have to have a financial background, right? So
Right.
that's what I'm saying. To me, I'm okay because the three that ultimately have the fiduciary responsibility are right here. And so, I mean, if we wanted to find it and say as a 5-person panel, that the commission will choose the 5 people with the most credentials, but representation will generally have an attorney, an elected official, whatever, that's fine with me, but, keep in mind it,
And we can go either way.
Sure.
I don't have a preference either way.
And that's, I kind of would like a little hybrid there, where we have some flexibility, but there's also some guaranteed, elected official and someone from the attorney's office or someone from the financial office.
And I can easily make that change back if you'd like to put that by 3 of them by position or 3 or 4 or
No,
whatever you'd
'cause
like.
see, that's where you lose me. I don't want it just given because of position. Because again, they don't necessarily have, this isn't looking over the county or the taxpayers' money. This is looking over the employees' money. So it should not ever be by position. It should always be by people who have the background to do the job representing the 1,000 employees.
I can do that however you'd like.
So that to me is why this one's different. When we're talking about taxpayer funds, yes. In this rare case, we're not talking about any taxpayer funds. There's no taxpayer funds that go to fund this. There's no taxpayer funds that, So that to me is why I don't think a position gives it. The only reason the commission is obviously by law the fiduciary responsibility. I mean, I do agree with Commissioner Ivey. It's good practice to always have an attorney reviewing everything on there and stuff like that, but, there's nobody from the clerk auditor's office on there. By nature, they deal with all money. So that's what I mean, to limit titles and,
I can draft it either way.
so.
Well, I think ultimately, either direction it goes, it can be changed at any moment if we wanted to change. If we went with titles, and then we decided that we didn't want that, we could take the titles off and go back. I know it's cumbersome, or we could leave it without, either direction, so.
We leave it without and make the appointments and see how it works, and if we need to revisit it in 6 months because we feel it's not working, then we can do that.
Well, we can.
Put it in.
Are you comfortable doing that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Like I said, I could go either way with it, but if we can get a unanimous on it one way, I think that'd be great. Okay, a motion would be in order then.
I'll move that we adopt the resolution as stated in regular agenda item 2.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second to adopt the resolution as stated number 2 on the regular agenda. All in favor say aye.
Right?
Aye, that passes 3-0. Okay. All right, this one, Bryce, you want to come up and, this is number 6 on our regular agenda, is to take action to refer. Now, remember, this is to take action to refer it back to the Planning Commission. And it's an ordinance, land use ordinance text amendment. And it's in 5-18 of the grazing or grazing zone?
Bryce Armstrong, Community Development Staff. These 6 and 7 are kind of related to 8 and 9. They kind of got a little out of order on the agenda, but I guess I can kind of give you a little background on 6 and 7. 6 is our office was asked to prepare a new zone, a grazing zone is what we designate it as, specifically for the West Mountain area, which is item number 7, which is to refer a certain area to have this potential new zone applied to it. And so item number 6 is the referral to the Planning Commission of a new zone. It's patterned after the mining and grazing zone, but eliminates some of the uses that there seems to be a concern about in that zone. And then number 7 is an action to refer to the Planning Commission, an actual rezone of areas in the West Mountain area to have this new zone applied to it. So that's just kind of a quick overview of those two, and those, again, are related to 6 and 7. I think these were kind of a follow-up to the application process that happened with 8 and 9.
And
So should we table 6 and 7 then and talk about 8, 9, and then recall? Is that what you'd like to do?
It's up to you. I think the intent was to have the discussion on 8 and 9 to kind of talk, because those are, have actual, those are applications that have received a recommendation from the Planning Commission are before you for action. So whatever you choose. I would say on number 7, we would want to clarify the extent of the property that is involved.
But you would do that in number 8.
Well,
Right.
number 8 was,
Because we would modify it in 8 and then refer the same action on 7 based on 8.
potentially, 8 was an application that was made by a citizens group of a specific area. It only included public lands on West Mountain, and I'm not sure if it's the intent of this new zone to be applied to just the public lands, as was indicated in the applicant's appeal, or all of the current mining and grazing zone on West Mountain.
So
I guess that's the discussion or the direction that we would need.
I think part of my question, or as far as how that works, I think 8 is an interesting proposal, but to me, it would be something that we would table because it would be dependent, some action there would be dependent on what happens with this other.
yeah, well, if we can, let's deal with 6,
Sure.
7,
Yeah.
and
So on 6, we had, sorry.
we can always table it.
Sure.
And it might be advantageous for us to table 6 and 7 for now, and then bring it back when it's appropriate, or even, appropriate even being this meeting. I'm not saying.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like in
Right.
whatever.
Or even whatever. So tabling it means that we just set it aside for a second.
I think when I entered them on the agenda request, I put 8 and 9 first, and I think they just populated backwards. I'm not sure. And so the intent was to have the discussions on 8 and 9 first, and then 6 and 7 were follow-up. But yeah, that's probably appropriate too.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that we table 6 and 7 on
I
the-
actually want to talk
Oh.
about 6 and 7 first myself.
okay.
Because I think that affects what happens with 8 and 9 for me. So that's my feeling. So,
Well, and keep in mind, when I say table it, I thought we were just gonna have the discussion about 6 and 7 in 8 and 9, then take the action. So I think what we're just saying is they're renumbered. 6 and 7 should have been 8 and 9, 8 and 9 should have been 6 and 7. I think that's what we're attempting to clarify here. We're not gonna disregard any discussion. You need to speak more into the mic.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what's the preference?
I'd like to talk about them.
Okay, let's talk about it.
7. So, I can lead the discussion out on number 6. This was something that I came up with and has been part of an ongoing discussion about the development, particularly of the southwest section of Utah County. A couple items that I would point out that I think are of significance when we look at this particular region of the county. In in the state of Utah, agricultural contributes about $1.6 billion annually to our overall economic impact on the state. Within that, Utah County leads the state in agricultural receipt production. So as a county, we play a vital role in the success of agriculture overall in the state of Utah. And not only in the state of Utah, we play a significant role nationally, specifically in some areas. Apricots, we are third in the nation in apricot production. A large portion of that apricot production comes from Utah County. We are consistently first or second in the nation in tart cherry production. Over 90% of those tart cherries are produced in and around the West Mountain area of Utah County. We're number 2 in the nation in mink production, with Utah County again leading the way for the state in this particular area, and a lot of that production is moving into the south end of the county. And interestingly enough, we're also 5th in the nation in sheep production, and a large number of the breeding rams and high-end livestock sheep that are produced to help that success in the nation and for the state comes from South breeders in South Utah County. So the agricultural activities in this particular area, specifically related to orchard production and grazing activities, not only affect the state on a significant level, we are major national players in those particular areas. As a result, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure we're taking action that protects the production of those particular areas so that we can continue not only to have the positive economic impacts on the state, but to continue to lead the nation in the vital food production that comes from those unique microclimates that exist in the south end of Utah County. We have watershed there, airshed, and soil types that can produce these things that don't exist in other parts of the state. You can't just pluck up the orchard and move it to Juab County. It doesn't work because of the microclimates that exist. And because of the national interest in this food production, I think it's imperative that we look at the activities there and take reasonable measures to protect those. That's why I had spoken with staff and felt like adopting a grazing type of a zone for this particular area in the county was something that would protect those vital national resources that play such a significant role to Utah County, to the state, and nationally to our capacity to produce food to feed people. And that's why I like this particular new zone and would like to see it in number 7 instituted to protect those vital resources.
Okay, that's a great overview. Thank you. Any comments do you have? Is from the public, are there any comments? And it looks like we're looking at 6 and 7. So I saw some hands in which they want to make some comments. Now would be the time. Come on up and state your name.
Julie Smith with Clyde Properties. I've been asked by Todd Cusick with CMC Rock to represent him today. He currently owns 500 acres or 5 parcels on the south end of Utah Lake. He is currently out of the country and asked me to read this. Dear board members, on September 1st, 2017, we were informed of the above referenced agenda items. Unfortunately, I am scheduled out of the country on September 5th and will not be able to attend your meeting to be heard on the subject. We are concerned about the lack of adequate notice on such an item that would negatively affect the property rights and values of our 500 acres of property and millions of dollars of investment made for the very purpose of extracting aggregate on our property. We believe the parcels referenced in this agenda bisects each of our parcels listed above, and we have not had adequate time to review this in detail. Each of our parcels are bordered on the east by property owned by the BLM, which is also zoned for mining and grazing. It is impossible to safely mine our property to its fullest extent without mining some of the BLM property adjacent to it. We simply need to include both of them in our mining plan to avoid having unsafe high walls and to have a rehabilitation plan that allows for future use of both BLM property and our property. We are currently permitted by Utah County to extract aggregate on our property, and we have been negotiating with BLM regarding altering our mining plan to allow for the efficient and safe extraction of material simultaneously on both of our respective properties. The public would benefit from the use of the BLM property and would collect royalty revenues from this activity. Our cursory review, given the time we have had, indicates that this would negatively affect our property value in excess of $15 million. We ask that no zoning changes be made to the public lands that are currently zoned mining and grazing, respectively. Todd Cusick, manager. And also want to go on record that it was my understanding that the county has no zoning ability over the BLM properties. Thank you.
I just want to clarify one thing, just so that everyone's fully aware. This is a proposal. It is, we are not taking action today on it. It would go through a process. It'd go back to the planning commission. They'd run through it. You've all seen that before. Comes back to the commission before there's any adoption. So there's still a lot of time. I just wanted to clarify to make sure that we're not taking any action today to change anything that's not even on the agenda to do so. Thank you for the comment, though. Come on up, did we get her name? Oh, could we get a copy of that too, just for the record? Thank you.
Renee.
Yeah, Renee. She's the
I'll
record
keep one
keeper.
here. Sure.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joan Landis, and I'm canceling two $300 sessions with my clients today in order to be here. I want to express my feeling about the proposal to possibly change the zoning on West Mountain to something that's more closely to agriculture instead of mining. I moved down there in our family of 7 children and 50 horses over the years to be down there instead of in Orem. And let me tell you, as I was looking at this painting that you have in your office there, I think it's a perfect example of why I'm standing here. Because that was Geneva in front of Timpanogos. And you know, people with short-sightedness fought to keep that old place forever. Joe Cannon was just adamant to keep it running. And I remember when I lived in Orem, and when I would dust, I wouldn't just dust beige dust, it was black. And so many people fought to keep that. There's so much money, there's so much jobs. But when that thing finally came down, guess what happened? It became a completely different type of community where clean industry wanted to be. Do you think Silicon Slopes would have ever wanted to happen within a stone's throw of Geneva? No. That whole possibility would not have happened. But somebody had to have the guts to say, you know what, that is not appropriate anymore. And the same thing for West Mountain. We have a resource there that right now we can think in terms of $15 million and some royalties, but the big picture is if we take down that mountain and start turning it into that kind of dirty industry, that the other possibilities will evaporate and you will not even know it. And so we are fighting to keep those options open for that beautiful type of development. Now my husband and I are actually developing some land right next to our home. And you can't believe what we have to do to test the water. Oh my gosh. If there's one little particle, benzene, arsenic, anything, it is shut down. And if we've got that kind of stuff doing our watershed, I can't imagine that could be healthy. And so I'm just telling you that, yes, it's easy for us to go to the short term and say, there's $15 million here, there's some money there, but the big picture, think Silicon Slopes. Think of that. And that could be some of the option for West Mountain, a beautifully developed situation that has the agriculture, that has the kind of things that community members would like to have next to them. But we have to be wise now. And to me, this proposal is a beautiful way to keep that pristine so that we have options in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joan. I know that everyone likes to clap, but our rules don't allow that. If you would help us with that, and that way we don't incite more emotion that's needed. If you'd help us with that, we'd appreciate it. Other comments? Yes, please. If you'd like, you can also just, well, you probably want to sit, but if you'd like to stand, you can stand behind and then come up too.
My name's Jamie Evans. I own Evans Grader and Paving. We own the closest gravel pit to this place. Two things. First, we had a whole committee about 8 or 10 years ago that we put together. From the county, it was a task force. We went to every gravel pit, and the recommendation that came back after we were done, we went to the orchards, we went to the gravel pits, we went and seen it all. And after it was all done, it came back that no action was needed and nothing was needed from the task force. I would encourage you to look back through those minutes. Peggy was involved in part of that. And I would encourage you to look back through and see what the findings already were. The next problem is, this is a situation of not my backyard. That means people want to move in, people want to have, we have lots of kids here, which we all love our kids. We have lots of kids and everybody wants to move, and then they want to shut the gate and say, no more in my backyard. And that's the problem. We all have to live here, and we've all got along here for 100 years. I mean, the Kigley Quarry is probably one of the oldest pits that was put there, and it's been put by the orchard for 100 years. And it seems like the orchards and everything are prosperous, and it seems like the gravel pits are prosperous. It's going to get worse. We're expanding, and it's going to continue to expand, and we all need the resources of the food, of the gravel, but it's a case of not my backyard. And we can't shut the gates. I mean, if we talk to the people that live there, they would like to shut the gates and let nobody else in, because that's the way it is when you move in. But when they were moving in, they wanted to move in because they wanted to move in there, but they don't want anybody else to move in next to them. And the problem is, it's going to happen. Dragging the resources to another spot is not going to solve the problem. You're just going to move it to another spot that those resources have to come. As the people get built, it's going to move the problem, and it's just moving the problem when we all have to work together. I don't have all the answers. It's pretty tough, but building a new zone, and my understanding is that you can't zone the state. So they're going to have whoever gets those state leases is going to have the competitive advantage on the rest of the property. And if I'm wrong about that, somebody please get with me and tell me. Any other questions you have for me? I did ask Peggy when I was up here last time at the commission meeting. My neighbor is the county, and they've been there for 25 years, and they're within 500 feet of me. No, we're not perfect, and neither are they, but I have not seen one registered complaint in a letter. If you guys have gotten one from the county, from your staff, I have never seen it in 25 years. It means that we co-compatible, get along pretty well. I'm sure I've made my mistakes and I'm not perfect by any means, but they're within 500 feet. It's even closer than that, but the farthest is 500 feet. And we seem to get along for 25 years. I don't know why miles we can't seem to get along, but I think it's just nobody wants it in their backyard. Anyway, any other questions for me?
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Come on up.
But
You have to come
up to
the mic. And this is, if I can just stipulate, this is a time to make a statements.
Okay.
It's not a debate forum or a back and forth forum.
I just wondered where his house is.
You know, once you ask him that question, maybe offline, and then you can go from there.
Okay.
Next, if there's somebody else who would
I
like.
wanted to say, I'm an old lady.
But please state your name for the record.
My name is Deneen Jensen, Denene, Jensen, Jensen. And I live in Lake Shore. And we did move there because we wanted to be in an agricultural area. Because we put some pretty nice houses down there. We're still paying on ours. This was the last of us. I mean, we're old. I remember going over Ironton Hill when I was a kid. And the mountain there was bare. There were no bushes, there were no plants. There was nothing on that east mountain by Ironton Hill. And then Ironton went down. If you noticed, there's trees, there's shrubs, there's everything on that hill now. We don't need to see that on ours. I know that when they first came in, they came to Robert's aunt. They asked her for permission to open the gravel pit again for 2 years on her property. They got permission, they put a road through. After they got the permission for the road and put it through, then all of a sudden, her gravel was not good enough. So they went above on BLM. So they didn't have to pay her what they had promised her. That's how it was put in, and they didn't ask any of us. The sheep and the cows and the horses didn't object, but the rest of us do object to everything they did. And it was all brought on us backside when we weren't there to say it.
Thank you. Come on up.
Can I make one more comment? The hours of operation too in the ordinance that you're trying to impose, I want can I?
Well, I'm just wondering if
That's
we're on,
the
or that's a
next
different,
agenda
that's a,
item,
that's
but-
a
That's the
different.
next item.
Yeah.
When we get
We'll
there.
Different one. Yeah.
My name is Clark Karras. Sorry, I didn't think you were looking that way. And my name is Clark Karras. I live at 7223 South, 3200 West in Benjamin. I'd first like to say, it's not that we're concerned about our backyards, it's concerned that it's our front yards. It is our front yards. The trucks, the digging, the dust, everything else is our front yards. I'd also like to just say that as one of two holders of grazing permits on the West Mountain, the Karras family is in favor of a change. There needs to be a change to protect us. There are 6, 7, in 7 miles, already 6 mines that are open. I would like to say, everybody keeps talking about that the county has no right to say anything about the BLM property. Well, we have a governor and we have an attitude in this state and we have a president and a Congress. I mean, Utah, we're owned way too much by the government. I find it interesting that the argument is to everybody's advantage when they want it to be. But the Clyde family donates in a major way to a governor that is adamant in his fight against the BLM and in taking Utah's rights back. And I personally believe that states' rights and county rights supersede any rights that the BLM has. So that's just my opinion, my feeling, and we're all going to see it tested all around the country to see if constitutionally we can take our country back. As far as we are a centennial farm, there are all kinds of centennial farms throughout South Utah County. Centennial farms are farms that have been there for over 100 years. And so, I mean, we can get into this talk about whose dog is bigger than whose and whose dog run was there first. But you know what? The settlers, the Welsh, the Icelanders, everybody that came into that area, we came in a long time before those semis did. Those farms and ranches were there. It has nothing to do with people moving in and not my backyard. We own those front yards. We own those backyards. And I'm interested in the fact that BLM that is used by these companies, they have to lease that property. When in the world has leasing superseded the private landowners' rights? We are private landowners. They rent that property from the government. We are private landowners. The other thing that I looked into was the 2010 census. Okay, 2010, you're talking about 16,000 people in Benjamin, West Mountain, Lakeshore, Palmyra. The growth rate over the last 7 years has been about 1.6% or 2%. So right now you're talking about maybe 20,000 people in that area. 20,000 people. And you can talk about, our, rights of digging, and we can't dig right if we don't, can't dig to this or that. I just want to say, we are in favor of a change. It needs to change. 10 years ago, there was a study. Well, guess what? In 10 years, this county has changed in a major way. On October 18th in Spanish Fork, 600 rams, or almost 700 rams, will be brought to the Spanish Fork Fairgrounds. And you will have breeders from all over the Intermountain West that have flocks of 10 and 20,000 sheep. They come to Spanish Fork because the majority of those rams are raised in that area. You can't tell me that the blasting, the dust, the noise of the trucks is starting to affect the breeding cycles and everything else that happens down there. And you have a conservation area that this county has, with the Audubon Society, has one of the top listed bird watching areas in the United States. I've seen great blue herons, snow geese, every raptor that you can think of that fly through that area. I guarantee you their nests are going to be soon empty because it's too loud, it's too much, and it's in the way. But it has nothing to do with not in our backyard. One, it's our front yards. And it's our kids who are standing on the road waiting to go to school with those front yards. But the Karras family is in favor of a zoning change. Something has got to start. And the private landowner, we have far more rights than does someone renting property or leasing property.
Are all of the mining operations all leased on leased
I have
property?
no idea, but a vast
I don't know
majority.
either, that's why I was asking.
This is BLM land, and we're in favor of the change that would affect BLM land. Change it and let the BLM come to you. Just like Bears Ears Monument, things can be changed.
Thanks, Clark.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm the chair for South Utah County Community Voice. So we are actually the group that did this proposal that we'll talk about in 8 and 9. We represent a lot of the families that live down in this area. A petition has kind of circulated, and just this weekend we received over 600 signatures of people that want something changed. They don't want more mining put in. So I really applaud you guys for getting some zoning. I don't know, either 8 and 9 needs to happen or 6 and 7 needs to happen. We talked to the DOGM. We've spent a lot of time meeting with the DOGM, the DAQ, and DOGM, this was their recommendation to us, was to work on zoning changes. They actually came out, we had representatives from the DOGM, DAQ, BLM, DNR, they all came out and met with us, and that was their recommendation, was that this area is probably no longer appropriate for mining, and you guys need to see what you need to do to get zoning changes. So that's why this kind of battle was started for us. So.
Thank you.
My name is Melvin Meredith, and I live on the south end of West Mountain. In fact, I adjoin the Kegley Quarry. I've lived there since 1957. So all these people that have moved in, big deal. Kegley Quarry has enough foresight to encompass their gravel pit with berms all the way around it. So they're not nearly the eyesore that some others are. Back behind Kegley Quarry, there's another mine going, and they came in through Kegley Quarry property, and they have the audacity to put a fence up and a gate so that when the people want to go up on West Mountain, they have to go up through my orchard to get up on West Mountain to ride the four-wheelers. a good neighbor policy would say, well, why force somebody up through somebody else's orchard to get to public ground? They've paved a little bit of the road going up in, and the rest of it is a fine powder that as the trucks come along, it just stirs up dust everywhere. And I also have an orchard right there. It wouldn't hurt them to pave that road up to right where they load those trucks. On top of that, they have a crusher as close to the neighbors as they can get it, when they've got a huge area up there that it could be placed further away from the neighbors. They're not good neighbors, and I don't care what anybody says. And if they'll do that, what else will they do if they get a chance? Kegley Quarry, I have no problems with. We've lived with them for, when we moved there, the only two mines that I know of was Kegley Quarry and an illegal gravel pit that the county had right there. That's the only two mines that was there when we moved there. And now the one behind us, just dust everywhere all the time. There's rules that you're supposed to wet down the roads. That lasts about one time a week, maybe. There's rules that you're supposed to cover the loads. That never happens. I really think that we ought to take a long look at this. If the quarry is the only gravel pit that I think that's legitimate. That's all I've got to say. I think that poor neighbors make for unhappy people, and they're about as poor neighbors as you can get.
Is that illegal pit still there?
No, what the county did is they turned it over to the pit that I'm complaining about.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thanks, Melvin.
Amen, brother. My name's Rich Bowman, 5425 West, 12,000 South in Payson. And I just live down the street from the Kegley. In fact, Brother Melvin just came and mowed my weeds down just a few days ago. I'm a newbie here. I just moved out here. My family and I are kind of refugees from California. We moved out here for last year, and we lived out in wine country in California. And one of the things they were doing out there, where they were trying to increase wineries. There's 45 wineries out in our area, in the city, and they wanted to increase it another 100 wineries. And so what they were doing was zoning to put horse trails and all these other things that bordered our property and things like that. And eventually they were commercial. Basically what they were trying to do was commercialize wine country, where a lot of us had moved to the country to get away from everything. And so that was one of our decisions to move out into this area here. We moved to Payson, clean air, beautiful people. We bought a little farm. That kind of a thing, and we've really enjoyed it. And then we just got word I'm not as prepared informationally as a lot of these brothers and sisters that come up here and talk about what's going on. But one of the things, I just want to let my voice be heard, that anything that's going to impact the air quality of where we live, because we live there, anything that's going to impact the water quality or the level of the water in our wells or anything like that, I'm against. Because this is where we live. This is our neighbors live there, and we don't want to move someplace else. We don't want to have to redig a well or anything like that. So I'm against anything that's going to impact that. And I apologize for not being as informationally challenging as the brothers and sisters that came up here, but I just want to give my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Shauna Phelps. I live at 8722 South, 6200 West, Payson, which is the West Mountain area. My husband and I purchased land in 1989, 50 acres. And part of the reason why we purchased in West Mountain, my husband and I were at the time were living in Mesa, Arizona. We wanted to get out of the heat. We wanted to get away from so many people. We wanted to get out of a neighborhood where we're surrounded. My husband went to the state. He went up into northern Arizona. He looked in Colorado, and he looked all through Utah. And he spent about 4 days literally driving and looking at properties. And of all those places he looked, we ended up at West Mountain for a specific reason. The property we bought was had irrigation rights and agricultural. So we were looking at tax benefits and specific water benefits. And that was one of the priorities. The major priority was the water rights, where we were going to end up purchasing. So when we purchased this land, it was agricultural and it had trees and orchards and such. We've raised our 6 kids there. We sold some of it off when a subdivision went into the south of us, but we purchased more to the west of us between our property and the canal. In order to have orchard land, you need to be at a certain elevation. You need to be up literally where it's rocky. Your trees do better. You have good drainage. You go down below and it's too cold and it's too much clay. So we're in a perfect location. As our kids started growing older, we realized we wouldn't have them for slave labor any longer. And so we thought, well, we better turn this into a U-Pick operation. And it took a while to catch on, but I do no advertising, but word of mouth just on my Facebook page. I mean, I have almost 2,000 followers in just a short 2-year period of time. And it's because what we offer the people is an environment that they do not get in the cities. We're offering them, number one, we try to stay away from pesticides. I go to classes all during the winter trying to figure out how to deal with pests in a more healthy way. So there's a lot to it. It's not easy. It's really tricky. Dust is a detriment. Dust breeds pests. Dust is bad for people's lungs. It's bad for all kinds of things. Trucks are dangerous. We have bicyclists and runners and hunters and things that come out to West Mountain because that's one of the only places left where you can do some of the activities that these people like to do. This canal, Highline Canal, along the canal, there's this roadway. Unfortunately, we get people from, I don't know who knows where, who don't want to pay for the dump. Occasionally, we'll take their furniture up there and dump it, which is quite sad. And to me, that's, every once in a while you get someone who thinks, oh, this is a good place for me to dump my trash. And that's exactly what I think about these gravel pits. This is a good place for me to dump my trash and make money in the process. When people come to our farm, they come to our farm, almost all of them ask, do you use pesticides? What do you do? They really want to know. They're coming out there because this is a clean place. They know where their food is coming from. They know it hasn't sat in a cooler. They know it hasn't been irradiated. They know all of these things. And so they feel safe out there. Well, that's not going to last very long if we have to say, by the way, our water's contaminated that we're watering our trees with because it's being leached into the water from this mine up here. I was thinking about this the other day, and this seems funny, but a funny analogy, I guess. But for some reason, all of a sudden, I started thinking of all the Western movies, Silverado, Quigley Down Under, even some of the newer ones, Wind Calls the Heart, or some of these shows that deal with Western way of life and how it was developed and the process that people went through when they came out here. And it seems like all of them have a kind of a common theme where there's somebody that moves into the community or has been in the community and offers jobs or offers protection or offers something that they think is more valuable than it actually is. And then they become the bully. They take advantage using their position, using the laws, using what's there, and they use the people that are working for them to enforce and propagate their misdeeds and they're bullying. And what we have here with these gravel pits are modern day Western, where all they care about is the money and not what they're doing to the community. And so this needs to stay agricultural, it needs to stay safe, and it needs to be an area where we continue to bring in people from other counties, because that's what I do. When I have You Pick Fruit, I get a ton of people from Salt Lake County down to my farm to pick. It's what they like, especially foreigners. They love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Val Kofad. I live at 6219 West, 6320 South. My backyard is in the backyard of the pit. You know, it's interesting. I serve as a vice chairman of the Voice, the community voice we got together, and I just wanted to just make one point. We had a meeting with DOGM, and it's interesting. They promised us that when we've called them and asked, for example, about traffic or something issues, they've said, well, that's not our responsibility. You need to talk with the county, or you need to talk with the state transportation people. When we've talked with them, when we have concerns with air quality, they say, well, that's not our responsibility. That's air quality. And so as we called around, we've had a real struggle in being heard. And I just want you to understand, we appreciate your time and attention that you've given us today. What's most alarming to me is they promised us a meeting that we would have with the county, with the community voice leadership, as well as these other agencies, and discuss who's in charge, and discuss, you know, what, for example, Kilgore's been operating now at least 3 or 4 years out there, and they don't have a water permit. You know, how do we do that? You know, no dust control, no. I know they truck water in now, but there's just a limited amount of you can do with trucking water. And it's a concern to us. You know, one of the things too, it happened in one of our planning commission meetings, was that they said, if you feel threatened, if property values or health or safety, there was a third objective of the planning commission, I can't remember, but all three of them applied to us. I personally feel threatened. I mean, I built my home out there, and there was a cloud of deceit that occurred in the approval of that. What I was told is one of the county commissioners at that time was kind of behind it, and that it was a small pit to do I-15 and clean that up, and then he was going to build a home there. And then the next thing we know is that Kilgore's out there opening a pit. We already have, I think it's 7 approved pits in the area. You know, the question is we doing any kind of, is the county doing any kind of planning? Or is it just free season? Is it just, you know, and then we talk about safety. They have a thing that they say there's 150 vehicles per day trips that are that they can do, and when we dig into that a little bit more, we find out that that's average over an entire season of operation. Now, I don't know if that's a 12-month or 9-month window, but we know that there's more than 150 vehicles. Now, 150 vehicles, if you think about it, for vehicle trips for just a minute, if you had a 10-hour day, they were open from 6 in the morning till, you know, even 12-hour day, you know, that's 15 or so trips an hour, and that doesn't seem too awfully bad, but when you start getting into 200 or 300, it's a trip every minute. And think about the line of vehicles. That's what we experience out there. And we say, the other day, our chairman, Chelsea, got a call, and she called me, and she said, did you hear what happened today? And I go, no. And they said, well, one of the trucks ran a school bus stop. You know, the guy put his stop sign up and lights on for kids to get on this, and the truck went around him. You know, a frightening experience for the bus driver. Now, you know, you hear those complaints. I don't know how valid they are or not, but I'm telling you right now, we feel threatened. we feel threatened because of the air quality. We feel threatened because of the traffic. We feel threatened because of our property values. And already, I can tell you right now, there has been 2 or 3 people that had bought in property that came and said, I'm going to be your new neighbor, going to build. Their homes and properties are for sale. You can't say that we're not being damaged. You can produce all the letters in the world and say we're not, but we feel threatened. And we applaud the county commission for listening to us. We were told, kind of off the side with the DOGM, one of the men there told me, he said, we would have never approved this site if we'd have seen all of this problem. And the advice was to get a zoning change. We don't know what else we can do. If they violate dust, we call up and complain about dust. People come out and they go, oh, it looks kind of dusty. So Kilgore goes, okay, we'll start to dust more, but do dust control. What does that mean? And I don't know if you recognize this fact too. This is a really important fact to understand.
Can I butt in just for 1 second?
Yes, sir.
If you could kind of wrap up.
I'll be done.
We have a line.
I'll be done.
4 minutes.
I'll be done in 2 minutes. But they have a proposal to have a high wall. Do you understand what the high wall is of a pit? It's a 300 or 400 foot high wall that will be the entire length of that 80-acre parcel of land. That's too intrusive. And so we say to the dogma, we say, well, how are we going to reclaim that? And they said, well, it's kind of steep. It's so steep, I don't know how we're going to reclaim that. There's no reclaim. We're going to have to live with that. So we just ask that this zoning, I mean, we need to do something. We lived there, and we got there before the pit. But I understand we've got to have gravel and things. But we have to have some planning and some management. And we're just asking for your consideration of that so that it doesn't destroy our lives or threaten us. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could come on up, if I could, I'm trying to keep track of some time here. If we could be
I'll make it quick.
I don't want to suppress anything, and I'm not trying to pick one way or one side or the other, but I just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to say something.
My name is Kurt Sorensen, 6209 West, 9600 South. I grew up in that area. My parents are commercial fruit farmers. I appreciate your comments and overview of that industry. I think it's very important to the area. And as you know, water is critical in tart cherry production. The water that we take from our well to process the cherries or take care of the cherries has to be clean. And we have concerns about impact on the water, the dust, and the long-term viability of that area to produce fruit. It will be negatively impacted if we have further development of mines. There's a second resource I'd like to mention, and that is that not many people consider West Mountain beautiful like I do. I grew up hiking and living on that mountain. We have a home that looks over the valley, and if any of you have been out there, you'll know it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. We've been all over the world. It's a beautiful place. West Mountain happens to be the center point of the south part of Utah County, of the valley. And if we allow that landscape, even though it's a dry, more barren landscape than we have on the east side of the valley, if we allow that to be scarred and disfigured by further operations, I think we're making a big mistake for our posterity. I think that the gravel is needed. There's a lot of, that area is going to look entirely different 20, 30 years from now, as we all know. It's up to us to make the decision that will protect it now. I don't know what jurisdiction you gentlemen have, or this group has, this body has, but I think anything we can do should be done to protect our agriculture and other citizens in that area and protect our legacy. I think the gravel, I've traveled all over the area. There are a lot of places where we can mine that would not have the negative impact on ourselves or our community that would have if we have further development of West Mountain. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
My name's Alan Long. I also live out in the West Mountain area. Fortunately, I'm a little further away from the pit, so I don't have to worry about the dust, but I do worry about the water. I'm not a hydrologist. I don't know how the groundwater moves. I don't know how it goes. I know that the pit is about 2.5 miles from Utah Lake. I know that the water can be contaminated very easily. I don't know if you will be able to stop the pit from operating and running, but I do know you have authority to limit the chemicals that are allowed to be used there. So I would encourage you to limit the amount of effect that can be done in the water out there. I know that when I went to build out there 8.5 years ago, that the county required me to wait for a year before I build because of a septic system issue. So I had to wait for a year before they approved me to build out there because they were worried about the waste from a small family. So I can't imagine the amount of chemicals in the water use that is used by the mining operations that are out there. But I do know that you'd have the authority to limit that and limit the chemicals that are used out there. I haven't heard anyone mention either that it's not just the gravel that's being taken out. There's an asphalt plant, and they're using whatever chemicals are needed to produce that. So I would encourage you to limit that. I'd be more open to a grazing permit area and going that route as well. And so, thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Julie Sainsbury, and I also live out on West Mountain, and I'm also a board member of the South Utah County Community Voice. I just wanted to say, yes, we are definitely a vital agriculture area, but also we are an area that grows families, and we grow children. In Utah County, we are growing. And I think it's very important that we look at this zoning on West Mountain and consider where we want to go. And do we have the foresight to do the planning that needs to be done? I have been doing some research, and I just want to give you some figures about where they project Utah County and the growth that's going to happen. So, since 1990, the growth out in Utah County, the population growth, has nearly doubled. Future growth is coming. According to the Utah Foundation Research Report, it says Utah's population has nearly tripled since 1970 and is projected to nearly double by 2050. The report showed Utah County's 2010 population at 516,564. The projected growth by 2050 is 1,216,695. This is a projected 136% growth for Utah County as a whole. Unincorporated Utah County, which would be the West Mountain area, including other areas, in 2010 had 10,009. Projected population for 2050 is 60,195. This is a growth rate of 501%. Are we going to want gravel pits up there? Are we going to want the mountain destroyed at that point? Where is our foresight? So we've got an excessive number of pits on West Mountain. The zoning for mining and grazing happened in 1942. So here we are, literally decades later, and we're saying that that zoning is still appropriate. It is not. It is no longer appropriate for the growth that has happened in the area and also the industry that occurs with agriculture there. There's also a lot of other reasons why it is not appropriate, but let's address the excessive number of pits that are on West Mountain. So when we met with the DOGM, they basically told us as long as West Mountain was zoned mining and grazing and the gravel pits met all the requirements that they outlined, they could not deny them permits. Okay? So as long as you have West Mountain zoned mining and grazing, the DOGM is going to approve permits. How many do we want out there? There are 7 permits that are operating out there right now. You were asking where are they all from? Okay, one of them is in Payson City. One is in Genola City. The other 5 are Utah County. Now, 6 of these 7 permits of these pits all open up on the east side of West Mountain. You've got Kigley Quarry, which is being run by Staker, that's on the south end, and then you come down to Kilgore, the Benjamin Pit, that is on the north end. This is a 7-mile corridor. These 6 pits all open up into this corridor. Now, this is where the majority of the populace of West Mountain is. And then they travel the roads. There's just basically only certain roadways that they can take to get to the freeway. They go through Payson, they go through Benjamin, they go through Lakeshore, they go through Palmyra. And so if you look at one pit that has their traffic route or their traffic plan where they say they have 150 one-way trips, that's different than trips back and forth, one-way trips. And then you're looking at that magnified by 6. Can you understand why we on West Mountain are concerned? Why this is oversaturated? Why it is time for you as county commissioners to look at it and make a decision of foresight and responsibility to the safety and well-being of the community members out there. The reason why I got involved in this was years ago. It was my son who was crossing the road when a gravel truck ignored the bus light. And what happened, I got a call from the bus driver. She was just beside herself. She had yelled at the window to my son. He stopped on the middle line. And that is the only reason why he was not hit. So just within these last couple of weeks, we had one of our members on our board who almost had a head-on collision because the gravel truck was going into the other lane to avoid a biker and failed to see her. She had to pull off the road to avoid an accident. Another person who's in this room, they were going around the corner where you come off of Payson into Utah Avenue, and she recognized that the gravel pit that she saw coming was going too fast. And so she slowed down, and it's good she did, because he was in her lane when he was coming around the bend because of the speed. Now, we have been told that this is all under the jurisdiction of UDOT, but there has got to be some responsibility on a county level. And you can take that responsibility by changing the zoning out here. If you change the zoning, it becomes a much safer place for all the citizens and communities members out there, and it is your responsibility to look at it and make that decision. We ask you, what is a reasonable and safe amount of trucks that should travel on these routes? We also, what I want to point out too, there are pictures of the trucks passing one another where the road isn't wide enough. They're off the shoulder. How do pedestrians go on those roads? There are no shoulder areas there. There's been damage on the roads. Also, rural roads have higher fatality rates. 19% of the U.S. populations live in rural areas, but they account for 54% of all traffic fatalities. The fatality rate in rural areas is 12.4 times higher than it is in other areas. So here you've got an agriculture resident zone right up against a mining and mining and grazing zone. It is outdated. It is time to change. Gravel trucks can weigh, the one with the tandems, can weigh up to 80,000 pounds. A normal vehicle is 3,000 to 4,000 pounds. With these gravel trucks, if they're traveling 65 miles per hour, if they would try to stop, in order for them to stop, it would take the length of 2 football fields. You've got a dangerous situation that you've got going on. You've got slower agriculture equipment on the road. You've got excessive speeds by the truck drivers. I've had several of them. When I'm going the speed limit, coming up behind me, past me, go ahead of me, I can't even get their license plate because they're going so fast. I had one of them pass me on a double yellow line by the intersection by 9600 South. You can do something about this. Other things to consider, why it's
Lee,
a good idea.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm kind of the timekeeper.
Yeah.
Which is an awkward position, but if you could kind of wrap it up.
I will wrap it up. You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. Other things to consider. Fire concern on the mountain. Have you ever seen that mountain burn? I have.
Every other year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Air quality, water quality. Also, the Fremont petroglyphs that are on that mountain. There's a lot of good reasons to change that zoning on the mountain. And I would hope that you would move forward with foresight and make that decision happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
My name is Nita Birch. I live in West Mountain, and my family moved to West Mountain 18 years ago with 9 of our 11 children. West Mountain is an historic area. Not only is West Mountain the only single standing mountain in Utah, according to an article titled "We Dig Utah Lake," ancient Fremont Indian relics have been found on the north side of West Mountain where Kilgore is and other areas that the federal government is focusing on preserving and recognizing its value. They have established Antiquities Act on federal land, the Natural Historical Preservation Act of 1966, and the Archaeological Resource Protection Act in 1979. Professor Allison of BYU stated that it is important to preserve these locations. After the excavation is complete, the digs are carefully filled in to preserve the integrity of the site, as well as to prevent others from destroying it. We'll never know how much history Kilgore has already destroyed. The 7 gravel pits on West Mountain are a danger to the residents of Benjamin, Lakeshore, Palmyra, and West Mountain. The dust from these pits pollute the air, and because of the heavy winds in these areas, the pollution from the mines are destroying Utah Lake as well as negatively affecting our health, agriculture, and orchards. The industrial pollution in gravel pits and asphalt production put out will damage the fragile well water, and once damaged, it cannot be repaired. Because of the heavy use of water from these mines, many residents' wells have already dried up. The lights, noise, and huge gravel trucks have ruined the peaceful way of life for us. Our property value is also threatened. No one wants to live near a gravel pit. The constant stream of huge gravel trucks on the roads especially endanger our children. There are 7 bus stops along 7300 South and 3200 West, and 9 bus stops along 5600 West and 9600 South, with 1 to 11 children at each stop. The buses take 5 trips each day, picking up and bringing the children home. The 7 gravel pits on West Mountain need to be stopped. Rezoning West Mountain would hopefully prevent the current gravel pits from expanding and stop future pits from coming. Rezoning West Mountain to the proposed G1 grazing zone is critical. Now, the picture is worth 1,000 words, so here's 11,000 words.
Thank you.
It's
Just I have to grow.
Just the tip does.
Just a tip. There you go.
There we go. My name is Tanya McDonald. I will be brief. I appreciate this chance to share a couple thoughts. I live right on 5600 West, which is the highway that runs north and south along West Mountain. And so I have the perspective of seeing dozens and dozens and dozens of trucks every single day up and down the road. And like she just mentioned, there are bus stops with children all along this road. And it is a danger, and I fear that we will have, like the previous commenter said, that we will have a fatality with one of these children. I am really concerned about it. I always walk my children to the bus stop, walk them across, just to make sure if the Kilgore expansion is allowed to go through, they have 45 acres now. If they're allowed to go to 80 or more, we will have many more trucks. I agree with a fellow commenter that says that property owners trump somebody who is leasing BLM land, and they have been non-compliant while they are there, and the county still kind of lets them just go along, and they say they'll do it, but there is a time when they need to be held accountable. And I agree that it should be a grazing community. This is a farming community. This is not a trucking and mining community. I also want to speak up for road bikers. I road bike myself, and there are hundreds, literally hundreds of people who come from all over the county. They park at the Benjamin Church, or the park across from the Benjamin Church right there, and ride all the way out to Genola. They ride around the mountain. I ride out to the lake often. There are hundreds of bikers that come out who don't live in this area, don't know about this meeting, but I want to represent them because they are on the road, and it's a danger when you have these huge trucks passing. It is scary. I have seen big trucks coming, and I can see a huge truck coming, and I just hurry and get off into the ditch because I'm going to get killed if I don't get over. The wind, when you're on a bike and these huge trucks just give you about, a foot or two, and they kind of go around you, the wind is enough to blow you over, let alone a truck running into you. So it is a huge concern. There are lots of races out there. There was just a race out there this past week with hundreds and hundreds of bike racers. So I want to represent them because they are not represented here today. Anyway, I just don't want our mountain. It is beautiful. I don't want it to look like the point of the mountain where you can see it from the satellite and it's a big, huge open pit. I think we need to protect the farming community and have it remain as farming. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Stuart Lamb, Kilgore Companies, Utah County resident, Spanish Fork, Salem. I represent today, it's a difficult situation to be in because I'm a Western guy. I raise cattle. I understand the ag industry as probably as well as anybody. But I also represent the growth industry. And that's the difficult position that we're all in. A lot of the speakers have talked about the imminent growth. Whether the mining goes away, the growth will happen. I live in a rural area of Utah County. I stand on my front door, my driveway, and I have to wait to cross 20 feet of asphalt. And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And it's indicative of the economy which we live in. Whether we accept it or not, we drive this industry. You, me, and everybody in this room are driving the demand of this industry on that mountain or wherever it can be. It's an insatiable demand. Whether we do it safely or not, I would recommend that we continue to have open forum and discussion with residents. I think there are things that we can improve on. I think things that the industry can improve on. I think there's better communication that we can improve on. So any request to push it back where we have more opportunity to explain ourselves and get feedback and create plans that are more acceptable to the public, we're all for that. You know what I mean? We're trying to figure out a way to cohabitate in an industry that's that you can't hide. We can't hide from the public. Our mining operations have to be full compliance with federal and state law. We spend a lot of money trying to comply, and we spend a lot of time and effort. It's not like we slam these things through. If there's something that doesn't work, then we try to fix it. We try to make it work. It is a difficult situation. Safety, our trucks are monitored through a Green Roads program. They have cameras in them. How many of you guys would like to go to work with a camera behind your head? Every day, we monitor them. There you go.
And in front. And
we track their speeds. They have a little light bar in their truck that if they're dangerous, these light bars go off. It's tracked, it's monitoring. We can reprimand them, we can counsel them, a lot of trucks have these. Not all of them do. There's better things we need to do in order to help with the safety programs on those roads. But like I said, I live in a developing part of this county as well. And it's indicative of the strong economy that we live in. There's just going to be challenges going forward. The people, as we work these things out, I think there's a way that we can cohabitate. We have. It's like the gentleman said about living next to Kigley. Staker's done a great job over the years to figure out how to work with people, you know? I think we're of the similar mind, or at least we want to be. You know, I know that a lot of people don't believe that yet, but we'd like to be that way. We promote agriculture. Good jobs promote agriculture. If you want to preserve ag in the current economic environment, have good jobs. That's the way things go nowadays. Unfortunately, it's the way the ag is. Anyways, any comment or questions for me since I'm
Not really Q&A, sorry.
okay.
It's kind of a statement.
My name is Carol Marziel. I live on 4000 South in Palmyra. I have grandchildren that live in Benjamin and Lakeshore, and some are dropped off at my house early in the morning and are dropped off a bus. And also, I was a school bus driver for Nebo School District for 18 years, and I drove out in West Mountain, and I am a bus driver also who saw the big trucks run through the red lights. And I don't know if I'm the bus driver who contacted that mother, letting her know that her child almost was hit by one of those trucks, but that also happened when I was driving. My road in Palmyra cannot hold the size and weight of these trucks. Our irrigation ditches are constantly dropping down, and our road is always having to be repaved. I've had my mailbox knocked down by these trucks. I've had my car windows, my windshield broke by these trucks. I've even had a rock hit my front window and put a crack in my front window. My home is close to the road. I understand that there's got to be commerce and that we're growing, but at the same time, our area cannot, the infrastructure that we have on our roads cannot hold these trucks. Our roads either need to be repaved, widened, and I don't see how they could be widened unless homes are taken down because we're close to the road. We are growing, but we also have to make sure that our children are cared for. As a bus driver, I know so many parents call the school district and ask the district if the routes, if their children can be picked up on the same side of the road that their homes are on rather than having to go across the road because of the fear. That's also an added expense for the school district to constantly have to change routes to make sure that the children are kept safe. There's much to be thought about before we do let this keep going on. I did get the truck that hit my car and busted my windshield. I had the truck license plate, the mile marker where he went by, the truck number, and I called the company and they said, oh, we're sorry, but there's nothing we can do about it. It's an added expense. My husband and I are retired now. I don't need any extra money taken out because these big trucking companies, and I realize that he's saying there are cameras. A lot of those trucks don't care that there's cameras. They do not go the speed limit. They do not cover their loads. There's rocks everywhere, and it's a danger to all of us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Carol.
Carolina Herron, I'll be brief. I was just going to speak briefly on cyclists on the road. I think it's been touched on twice already, but there's several businesses, several races, and thousands, not hundreds of cyclists that use that area. A lot of our racing events are in that area. So just mentioning in terms of cycling that we are in favor of the proposed change. We'd like to see the area kept the way it is right now. Basically, the roads simply can't deal with the amount of traffic. And in terms of the trucks and cyclists, it's just not plausible. The roads are falling apart. We're dealing with major holes, major issues, and we can't even ride as it is. But like it's been mentioned, races happen weekend after weekend after weekend. My own race is about 600 women. We have also Little Red, which is thousands of riders. We have Noble, we have Nebo, we have Spanish Fork Cycling Club. And those don't affect just county, but their state, and we even have riders that come from outside of the state. So just like to have you keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Colette Russell, and I live on 3862 West, 7300 South, and the trucks are in my front yard constantly. I used to have a beautiful yard. This summer, I've not planted a flower because I can't stand to be in my yard. I realize, I'm going to be really brief, that the state is growing and we need roads and there's a need for growth, but I don't understand, it's not in the right area where the pit is, to haul gravel as far and asphalt as far as Lehigh, where my children live. And past my house, I get them coming and going. There's got to be different, there's closer pits, so we can keep our farming and grazing and where our area was supposed to be. And I know I've called the company, I made complaints, I get voicemails. It's not, they don't want to hear that. So I've talked to Stuart before, but it's usually, I get a recording. And the road in front of my house has been repaved. And I think we're pretty awesome taxpayers because we are going to be the ones that paid for it, for them to destroy it again. And the asphalt was completed probably a month ago. And if you came and looked in front of my house, the road is already bowing. So we'll be paying for it again. So I just have a lot of questions, and I'm really grateful that you're listening to us because we need some answers. And we need to keep our farming and grazing and West Mountain what it was supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette.
I'll be brief. My name's Matt Scott. I live in Benjamin. I live on 8000 South, which is the main road that comes off the freeway into Benjamin. I would encourage you guys to drive down that road. And where my lane starts, entrance into my house, and there's a stop sign to 3200 West, the safety concern, you ought to see the skid marks that are being left by these trucks. Now, if they're going the speed limit, why would there be skid marks? Probably about 500 feet long. And it's continuing to happen on that road. They go so fast, they hit the railroad tracks. A month and a half ago, belly dump opens up, loses partial of his load, goes through the intersection at 3200 West, turns right, and then finally realizes, hey, something's been knocked loose, disengaged on the truck. It took 2 or 3 days for him to come out with a sweeper and sweep the material off to the side of the road. And safety, that's my biggest concern. And I'm a farmer. I've been blessed to be back to the family farm. I sell irrigation equipment. I look around this room and I see the fruit farmers that are here. You want to speak about their livelihood, it affects my livelihood too. If they have a down year, guess what? They don't want to put in irrigation. That affects. So there's a whole cycle. It's just not about what we can sell gravel for. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Marziel. I live on 4000 South in Palmyra. Eldon and I are neighbors. We both live on that main road that comes off Interstate 15 at exit 260. That road is very narrow. They've told you about the bicyclists. It's open range from Main Street, clear around the bend down in Lakeshore. There's animals out on that road all the time. We just had a fatality on our road, I think it was 3 weeks ago, not due to the semis, but the roads in South Utah County, especially southwest western Utah County, they're not built for this kind of truck traffic. I was an independent trucker for 40 years. I just pulled one trailer. My truck was registered for 80,000 pounds. These trucks that are running up and down our roads, they're pulling sets of doubles. They're either side dumps or belly dumps. These roads have no shoulder. And you put two of them side by side, they take up the whole road in both directions. It definitely is not safe for these trucks to be running on these roads. Now that is State Road 77 that we live on, 4000 South. My wife told you our grandkids get on the bus in front of our house in the morning. In the afternoon, they get off the bus, but the bus is on the opposite side of the road. So our grandchildren and the neighborhood children have to cross that highway. And if you just get one person that doesn't respect those red lights and comes around that bus after that bus driver has given the children the okay to cross, a lot more than the profit of the gravel and what's coming out of the ground has to be taken in consideration. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jim.
Hi, I will be really brief. My name is Charlotte Hawkins. I live on 8000 South in Benjamin. We were under the impression that when all of this started with the gravel pit on the north end of the mountain, that our road was going to be used, it is a county road, with a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. We were under the impression that was going to be a temporary use. We have such a dangerous situation on that road. Somebody really needs to come and set up a camera. I mean, you can do it in my yard, whatever. The speeds on that road are unbelievable. And there is no shoulder. If someone leaves that road, we see neighbors that are in such near miss, horrible things all day long. The front of my house is 25 feet from this road. And having trucks pass that, and I'm telling you, the majority of them are traveling between 55 and 70 miles an hour. There's hardly time for some of them, the Jake brakes that come on, trying to get themselves stopped before the corner, which at the corner, there is no space for traffic when a truck is there for them to even make a turn. We are going to see a death. And something needs to be done. It's all great to have rules and have all the new regulations. There's never any enforcement. The county sheriff's department used to sit on our road. They were there every day. We welcomed them to sit on our property to try to keep the speed under control. It's not just the big trucks, it's everybody. But since the trucks have been traveling, there's no presence of law enforcement on that road anymore. You never see it. I have a hard time believing it's not because the trucks are traveling on that road, because it was always there before. We need to do something about the regulations and the speed limits at the bare minimum to keep from having a terrible tragedy happen on that road. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Jerry Fowers. I'm from Santaquin. I'm also here representing Fowers Fruit Ranch and the Utah State Horticulture Association, a group of professional development for fruit growers in South Utah County and throughout the state. I just want to bring up a point. We've heard lots about trucks and speed limits, everything, but I think the whole problem is that a lot of people wouldn't be so upset is if people were already following the rules. And enforcing the rules. I think the county's let us down by not enforcing the rules, but I also think that the gravel pit owners have let us down by not following the rules as well. And yeah, on my farm, I have to follow new rules. I have to test my irrigation water and know how many days I can irrigate a crop before I can harvest that crop. I can't go irrigate and harvest the same day because I could contaminate someone and give them an E. coli problem. And that's coming out of the Highline Canal water that we use. Another thing that we have to self-test is pesticide residues. We have to test and make sure that we're at a certain level before we can pass that on to the consumer. So why aren't we asking the gravel pit companies to do the same thing? Why are we trying to police them? Why aren't they policing themselves? Why aren't they putting up monitors in their own pits? Why aren't they saying that, yeah, our dust levels is high today, so we're gonna receive a fine? The problem is if we complain about the dust and we have somebody come out to look at them, by the time they get there, the dust is settled. There's no more dust problem, right? And so I think that's the major issue with a lot of people, and I think we need to follow through with that. But another problem is in my orchard, if I receive dust on it, you guys already understand that we receive insect damage or pest damage. But think of leaves as solar panels. And if you have solar panels on your house and you start seeing that they're getting kind of dirty, are they running efficiently? Are you getting the most bang for your buck? No. How many of you are going to crawl up there and wash all them solar panels off and shine them up good so that the sun can get in? I can't really do that with leaves. I have to wait till next year so that the leaves grow new leaves and they're clean. So how do we measure that damage to fruit growers in that sense? At some point, I'm starting to lose revenue based on the amount of dust. And our farm has personally been hurt by a gravel pit on the west side of West Mountain. That pit did make things right with us personally, but that's not to say that all pits will do that. We've heard of Kegley Quarry's a good pit and the other pit isn't. So I know that we have lots of things to talk about, and I just urge you guys to think of those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
My name's Charlie Cody, and we live out on Lincoln Beach Road, just north of the pit that we're talking about today. And we're not lifetime locals here. We moved here a year ago, my husband and I and our 3 kids. My middle boy is profoundly affected by autism, and we're not new to agriculture. We had a cow-calf operation in Montana, 3rd generation farmers and ranchers. And we sold our family farm to be here to provide our son what he needs. So I feel like we're invested, big time, so that we could kind of recreate a little bit of our lifestyle on a little tiny 5.5 acre spot up on West Mountain. We got to the lakeshore area and thought, this is like the spirit of home, what we had at home with agriculture, with good folks, good neighbors. I never felt like anybody had the gate shut on us and didn't want us to come in. It seems like our neighbors love us and vice versa. And you can talk about the air quality and, you know, the dust chokes the grass and the grazing and the farming and all of that seems pretty obvious. Everybody's hit on that pretty hard. But what I haven't heard a lot is this, just the spirit of what you are after when you're living there. The good folks, the good neighbors. I can call my neighbors at 3 o'clock in the morning when my husband's out of state working, and they're gonna be there. And you don't get to advertise that fact everywhere. Also, growing up in farming and ranching, you, like this gentleman that just spoke before me, self-regulating, you do that when you're farming and ranching. You do the right thing. When you feel like you're being a poor neighbor because you're choking everybody out with dirt, you don't wait for the county to come in and force you and strong. You do the right thing. You get water trucks up there, you get your water rights, or whatever you got to have in place to do the right thing. I think it's just a magnified vision of what you're supposed to do when you're being a good neighbor. We've got the fruit orchard on the point of the mountain. The whole spirit of this whole gravel thing is just different to me. The fruit trucks, they slow down, they get out of my kids' way when they're riding their horses. It's like, we belong here. This is being good stewards of the land, wanting to take care of folks. I've been run off the road by the gravel trucks. My daughter says, can I go ride my horse up the road? Yeah, you can go north, but you can't go south. I'm afraid they'll get killed. It seems like everybody kind of gels, everybody gets along, but that whole situation seems very red thumb. It just sticks out. It's just go, go, go. People, I think, would feel more apt to work with folks if they didn't feel like there was this whole level of deceit or we're being tricked. Why is this happening now? Why, that's not what we were told. Or, you know, my husband rode up there with my little boy the other day, get out of here. And they run off. We don't get that anywhere. You know, it just doesn't seem like it fits. So I don't want to go over all the things that everybody else has said, but just the spirit of it and the whole nature of an agriculture setting, that's what we love. That's why we're here, why we left everything lock, stock, and barrel to be here, was because we wanted to recreate that for our family, and having this in that setting definitely feels, makes us fearful. Did we do the wrong thing? Are we in the wrong spot? So I hope not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Flora Clark. I live on West Mountain, just south of Cody's, and off Lincoln Beach Road up by the canal. There's two things that have not been mentioned here over the months that we've. One is that at one point we were told, and it was in writing as I remember, that they would restore where they dug. And you got the very clear impression it would be rapid. I think that's why they back and said this is a 2-year commitment to get the gravel for the widening I-15. I've been here 20 years, so I'm not, we're very invested. That nobody says anything about any restoration, and except I heard there were $250,000 dollars allotted, and then somebody said, well, that wouldn't even do an acre, so we can't do it. Wow. Then the other thing is about rock slides and water slides. We don't have anything up behind us much, but we have had water when like the rain we had about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That was unusual, but not unthinkable. And it's grassed up there, and still we had flooding come down, and we just missed our back area. It finds its own path. Water runs downhill. Now, I thought that last rain, it just might have been possible to cause damage at the mine. I don't know if it did, because I've seen water come down with rocks. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's really, it's very powerful. So those are two issues that if they keep going, I think need to be addressed. Everything else, I agree with. It needs to be zoned at least no worse than it is now. The laws need to be enforced on the trucks. The speed limits need to be enforced on the teenagers, the middle-aged women who are rushing around, all of us. And it's just the way it is. It has to be. It's very scary to stand up here. Very scary for any of us. And it's not our comfort zone. So for heaven's sakes, do the right thing.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Martin Van Hemert. I live in West Mountain along 5600 West, the main thoroughfare along the mountain. We've lived there about 9 years. Whenever anybody moves to an area, they assess, what is this place like? If we'd been the sort of people that maybe didn't care for agricultural smells, obviously we would have said, forget this, we'll go somewhere else. But what wasn't there when we moved here was a gravel pit, and we would, if we'd have known at that time that there was a potential for it to look like the point of the mountain, we would not have moved there. We bought our home probably at the peak of home prices. Right after we purchased, of course, they dropped. Who knows? Maybe we're still upside down. As far as our mortgage, but this certainly won't help. Our home value or anyone else's. you know, obviously we need, you know, gravel pits need to be somewhere, but they need to be built in places that are away from, you know, from homes. So people can decide at that point, well, do I want to live by a gravel pit or not? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin.
It is so scary to come up here.
It shouldn't be.
I wasn't going to, so just a couple quick points. I'm grateful he brought
State your
that.
name for the record, though,
Oh,
please.
Leslie Ermston. I live on 7300 South. And there's definitely 300 trucks, maybe 400 sometimes going past. Also, I would be happy to I've thought about taking my blow dryer out there maybe, pointing it at the trucks. I do appreciate the highway patrol. They did pull a truck over 2 Saturdays ago. I called again last Saturday, and I don't know if maybe there's a connection. Maybe Highway Patrol's calling Kilgore because they immediately slowed down. I don't know. I can't prove that, but they did slow down, and then we did see some Highway Patrols out there. So that's one of the things on my road. I do agree with the speed, but I agree with that also is that if you look at Geneva or you look at Kennecott, those homes built up to them. Joe and Stuart Lamb were nice enough to talk to me on the corner for a very long time when this started going on, and they have a pit up in American Fort Canyon. And they were saying that they worked well with their neighbors up there. Well, those big giant homes chose to move in on them. They saw the pit, they moved in there, and they chose to build there anyway. And we've been there for 17 years now. And so they have come in and moved in on us. It's not like we chose to move in on them, I guess, when someone talks about them being in our backyard. I'm not asking the other quarries to leave or go away because I moved there and I don't want them there anymore. I'm just saying that they've moved in on us. Is there somewhere else that Kilgore can go? Yeah, it might cost them a little bit more money, but in all of Utah, I know that we need to develop and that we need to have roads and we need to grow. But is there somewhere else that they can be? I hope that there is. I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I think Stuart or someone talked about or one of you guys asked somebody, have you contacted them? Have you told them the issues you're having? Have you got a hold of them and talked with Kilgore? I personally haven't in the last little bit, but after I spoke with Stuart and Joe on the corner, they said they wanted to be good neighbors, and I was grateful for that. And so I put forth some things like the speeding, less trucks, and everything I said, hey, well, how about could you do this? Could you do this? It was shot down and they couldn't. And Joe was nice enough to give me his email. I went home, I shot him an email and said, hey, these things aren't working. So how do you propose being a good neighbor? Everything I proposed, you guys didn't want to do. And so what are some of your ideas that you guys can be a good neighbor to us? And he responded and said he was out of town and that he'd get back, and then he did never get back to me. So I know that they say they want to, and I can appreciate what Stuart Lamb said today, but I don't know after everyone else has spoken to you that they really do want to be good neighbors in the way that will work. The intersection, as far as I'm talking about the traffic, I go past that four-way on 3273 all the time. If a truck is going, because we know the county you guys passed an ordinance saying that they had to leave that pit and go to the most direct route, which takes them down my road or down into Payson or out into the Palmyra Road. So they come to that four-way stop, and if they're going to go down and turn right to the freeway, there's on busy school mornings that you're there's trucks lined up all different ways, and there's vehicles, and there's a lot of people lined up behind a truck. That truck has to sit at that four-way till all the traffic's cleared and then spin over into the far lane. They've got to wait till it all comes through. So there's real congestion there on busy mornings or busy afternoons even when the trucks are there. And like I said, I'd be happy to get a gun so I could tell you. I don't know how fast they're going, but I'm pretty sure, and it's 50 right in front of my house. I'm pretty sure a lot of those trucks are going a lot faster than 50 miles an hour. So I am definitely for the change of the zoning. And I appreciate Nathan Ivey so much for what you said about the agriculture when you opened this meeting and how much Utah County influences that. And I think changes do need to be made. The zoning, the mining and zoning was, when did she say, someone stated the date? Years and years ago that it was zoned that way, so I'm for the change.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Callie Bronson, and I also live in the West Mountain area. And I have all these same concerns, but this particular agenda item, I just want to speak specifically to that we can see that mining and grazing are not operating together to the betterment of our community on West Mountain in Utah County. And so therefore I am in favor of this rezone to have it simply the grazing. We can see that mining and grazing isn't working together well. Thanks.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you were getting up besides to pray, Eldon.
I got a button over here.
I was interested in the, Eldon Neves, my name. I was interested in when they talked about a meeting that they held, and they were very interested to hear our concerns and so forth. I attended a meeting at Lake Shore, or Benjamin Park there, and with Kilgore, I think it was. And they indicated all of the concerns and so forth. And at the end, I think one of them said, we want to do a meeting so we can listen to your concerns. And at the end, I said, well, is that going to change? Are you going to change anything? He said, no, we won't change anything, but we'd sure like to listen to your concerns. And I think that's basically what it amounts to, is they're going to do what they're going to do. Kilgore, I think they're a bunch of scoundrels, a bunch of criminals. They should be run out, as well as the other operators. They have no concern about the community. The truck drivers are like trained monkeys. You know, they will not slow down for anything. They have killed on that road. Sister or Mrs. Marziel talked about. Well, the road itself is 11 feet from center to the side, and then you've got 1.5 feet on the outside, which is just loose gravel. There's no borrow pit. It just goes right down to the ditches. And you got 2 trucks going 22 feet. There's absolutely no room for anything besides those 2 trucks. We come around the corner, and you have about 2 seconds for them to see anybody that's in the street from where I live. They have 2 seconds to pick up the idea there's somebody in the street, and they mentioned they have 2 football fields to stop. We had Robert Talbot was killed just past the intersection. That was 3 weeks ago. Quinn Batty was killed. He was 21 years old. Lance Money was killed on that road, and he's 14 years old. And that's in the first 3 miles from where Main Street and Spanish Fork goes, the first 2 miles. You have cattle on the road. My wife this spring hit a cow. Fortunately, the cow survived. But anyway, she hit a cow and messed the car up and so forth on the same road. You cannot see black cattle in the middle of the night in a rainstorm or any kind of storm. If you have an accident, there's no room to get off. If you have your car break down, there's no room. Let's see, I had some really good things here if I can remember them. Now I had a daughter, Commissioner Lee, I had a daughter-in-law, had 3 children in the car, and they were pushed off the road, ran into a ditch. Fortunately, they tipped upside down but didn't go into the ditch didn't have any water in it. That's the reason they survived. Kilgore's killed Mr. K and Mona some years ago, ran him down. I don't have the date or anything right now with me, but I can get that. And they weaseled out of it, had their bank of lawyers and little money, and they weaseled out of it. As far as $1 million, $15 million or whatever they talk about investing, if I lose money on a piece of property, I don't expect you, Commissioner Ivey, to bail me out on it. Shoot, let them lose $15 million if that's their own choice. Let's keep it. That's not, as everybody said, my main concern is that road and the fact that I had a grandson. My son lives across the road with his wife. We say hadn't because of that road, but anyway, we had a little get-together. We're talking around and so forth, and this little 3-year-old, all of a sudden, we had a whole bunch of us there, and we should have been taken into the authorities because we lost sight of this little boy. And all of a sudden, we said, where'd he go? He wandered across the street back to his house because he got tired of me, I guess, or something. And if they had, for some reason, one of those trucks come by there, they had no way to stop. We were just really, as I think about it, as I talk about it, it gives me chills, the idea that he could have been killed easily. I had the occasion where I pulled out with my wife on that road, and the truck was coming. I thought, those sons of, and I probably cussed a little bit. I'm just going to see what they're going to do. I came out, he looked me in the eye and kept coming, and he would have run me over if I hadn't got out of the way. It's unsafe. It's unsafe. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you. All right, seeing, oh, there's another one standing up, unless he's, there we go.
My name's Joe Johnson. I'm with Kilgore. My intent wasn't to actually get up after Stuart had got up, but I just wanted to make mention of a couple of things. First of all, we are not in favor of the zoning change. We think that in making this zoning change, that all we're going to do is bring us back to this point sometime in the future, as there's a petition for a modified zone or whatever happens that way. We certainly hear a lot of the issues that have been addressed today. We agree those are real issues. However, a zoning change doesn't necessarily resolve an issue. You know, a zoning change doesn't make a road wider. A zoning change doesn't address certain factors in our regulatory requirements, those kinds of things. We think there's better solutions to those things and ways that we can coexist. You know, I'm trying to figure a nice way to say this. You know, me personally, my integrity means a lot to me. It's something that I pride myself in trying to do the right thing and do the right thing by people. You know, am I perfect in that in my life? No, I'm sure that there's many in here that do much better about that than I am. But we talk about, you know, why is there maybe a little bit of a difficulty in sorting out some of these issues, and you know, sometimes that gets hard to talk when my coworkers, my friends, are called trained monkeys, scoundrels. We're told that if we're killers, that if we come on someone's property and knock on the door to have an open dialogue, we will be shot. And those are things that have been said on public record in these meetings over the last couple of months, and even today some of those same things have been said. We don't think that public forums with people coming up to the microphone and doing this are the right forum to find those solutions. The planning and zoning meeting, Rich Thorne from the AGC was actually here and recommended a task group be put together to talk about some of these issues. You know, we would certainly recommend some of those kinds of things because we don't think this is very productive. You know, we think there's better ways to find solutions to these problems, you know, because there's lots of ways we can coexist. We can find ways to work together with UDOT to widen roads, to control speed limits. There was a speed limit study done there several years ago prior to Kilgore being involved, and because there wasn't mutual cooperation there, my understanding is from some of the residents the speed limit increased, didn't decrease. But without us working together, these problems won't ever be solved. There's certainly ways to have you know, better cooperation, but I don't think a zoning change accomplishes that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Okay, we will we'll pull it back up to here for discussion and comment. And it looks like 6 and 7 are pretty tied together. If we could keep those together, if there's any objection with that, if we can kind of keep them close together. I'll make a couple of comments. When Shauna was up here, she was talking about Western movies, and I like Western movies too. And I also like a little bit of Western history. One of the things I find interesting about Western history, as some of you remember, there was a time when the farmer and the rancher didn't get along. They fought each other, usually over fences, and a lot of names were called. That's where we get Clodbuster, Cowpoke, you know, those kind of things. I'm sure a lot worse, but those are the ones that stick out in my mind. But they had to work through, and I'm sure there were some areas that were able to work through the issues and finally find an opportunity to work together. And now I see the farmer and the ranchers as allies in a lot of respects today. So I don't know the answers for sure on these issues. I can see a lot of concerns both ways with it. I know that we can, this again is to take action to refer it to the Planning Commission. I've never been opposed to referring things to the Planning Commission because it's a process. And I like the process of letting others take a look at it and weigh it, measure it, and say yes or no, or say this is what we recommend, and this is what we can do or we can't do, and this is the reason why. So I've never really been opposed to taking action and referring anything to the Planning Commission. Then, of course, it would come back to the Commission ultimately for another, the final say on what their recommendation is, and we can move forward. So I don't fear personally fear a process. I do fear a little bit when I was reading through the minutes from the last one that it was a little bit inferred that the Commission, by referring it, there was a little bit of a hint that the Commission was pushing it. And I don't necessarily also want that to be inferred to the Planning Commission. I'd like them to see it with their own eyes and say, we're referring it if we refer it. We refer it back for you to take a look at it, analyze it, and come back to us with options and thoughts. And that's kind of how I see this. So, Commissioners, for the dialogue, what's yours?
So I got a lot of thoughts. I'll try and limit myself to a few minutes too. So the first thing, I'm probably going to say some stuff that somebody in here will like at one time, and by the end of it, you'll probably all have something to hate me for too, including the Commission. But let me start with Kilgore. My problem with some of the stuff being said is I was always raised to be a good neighbor, and sometimes being a good neighbor is costly. And I do know of the other pits, Stager Parson, Clyde Companies, Jamie, have reached out, and they are good neighbors. Everybody considers them good neighbors, and to me it would be offensive as a business owner to have my brand name tarnished because I wasn't a good neighbor. I think we can look at ways to be a better neighbor. That being said, I think the name calling and some of the stuff and accusations are just uncalled for these days. I just really do. Again, sometimes as a business owner, you can't control a truck driver, and sometimes you go and take care of it. Here in the county, I'm frustrated because there are people that do stuff to the public that irritate me. We do stuff about it, and sometimes policies don't get to do what I want, but I still have to live within those rules. Part of me also, when I hear everybody talk about land rights, I agree. But nobody's land rights outweigh any other person's land rights. So that's why I asked that question. I agree there could be a difference in leasing the land, but if you buy a piece of property and it is zoned under that, whether the zone should have been there or not, when you buy it at that time and you're in operation, you're allowed to do that. So part of what bothers me with this is, this to coin an expression that I was raised on, this is lipstick to a pig, because any ordinance or anything that we do does not change the current operation of those pits to this day. They're still allowed to do exactly what they're doing. It's not going to decrease the speed limit. The Commission does not control the speed limit. We can make wider roads on county roads, not state roads. We don't do anything when it comes to that. And so this is kind of part of my problem. The other problem is for a commission, and that's us three, we have had lengthy hour-long debates in commission meeting about not referring stuff to the commission meeting. Why do we have to do it? We're the three duly elected officials. Why do we have to listen to them? And then we've also talked about being inclusive in operating, and we do for the most part. So I think to refer something at this time, it's not ready. I think we need to bring some of these groups. This is the first time I've heard of this citizens group voice. That's the first time I've heard reference to them, and I think to have them and gravel pit owners and commissioners sit together and kind of draft an amendment, then refer it to Planning Commission. I think that's kind of where I'd like to see it, not one-sided. I think if we send it, because Planning Commission, they're only going to evaluate what we refer to them, and then they'll make proposed changes. And I've sat through some of those meetings. So for me, I just don't think we're there yet. But I agree something has to be done. how to enforce, do something. I don't know. I really don't know the answer. It scares me to death to hear these stories. I know, but again, I do not ever want to be accused of making policy because 1 out of 7, there's not one person in here today that made comment. I listened very carefully, and I'll go back and rewatch. There's not one person in here that accused 6 of 7 of doing anything wrong or violating or not being a good neighbor. And to make policy and hurt an industry and hurt all of us, for 1 out of 7, for a bad apple, for an analogy, to me is not a good way to make policy. 6 out of 7 are being better than good neighbors, and 1 needs some help in being a good neighbor, and this is just my opinion. And the reason I say it affects all of us, we can say that the gravel pits, trust me, if I lived right next to a gravel pit, I'd be right with you, angry as all angry. I know I would. I feel exactly what you're saying, and anytime I see my kid nearly get hit by a car, I think we should move the driving age to 24 or whatever. I feel the same frustration. I really do. But that being said, if we move the gravel pits to places where people aren't, eventually people still are there, and then we'll have the same discussion, and I understand that. But I remember I grew up building homes, and I remember calling Wilford Clyde, who's my neighbor and very good friend, truthfully, and he's been my bishop. Like, literally, I know this man very well. And I remember growing up building houses with my grandpa when we paid $20, $25 a yard for concrete. And I remember when it quickly went to 80 and then 100 and 120. And that was not that long ago. And a lot of the reason is because they have to ship in materials and all that thing, and it gets up there. And all of a sudden, what I hear from county employees and county residents, and the whole reason that the county's credit rating is not as good as it is because our pay does not match what the cost of living is here. That is one of the main reasons, the only reason that our creditors tell us that we don't have the highest possible credit rating in the county. And moving and making some of these decisions will greatly impact our housing. We will stunt our own growth. We will do a lot of damage unforeseen. So when we talk about foresight, by moving gravel pits, and again, I'm not saying that they're all necessarily right, but by moving some of these further away and trucking in, it increases the cost of concrete, and it increases the cost of roads, it increases the cost of all these things. So the people who are developing, Ms. Landis, who's doing her development, her cost of development go up, the cost of lot go up, and then the cost of the home goes up, and therefore all of a sudden we keep wondering how in the heck this is going on, and we have a housing crisis and some of these things. So for me, it definitely needs to be discussed. I just don't think we're there. I think we need to put together something with a group, get together and discuss all of these things so that we can refer an action that benefits our fruit growers, our ag, our residents, and the industry altogether. And I don't think we're there yet. And the reason I say that is because quite honestly, I wasn't involved in any of this process, and being one of the 3 decision makers, I think I should be. So those are just my thoughts and comments on it.
I open my comments with this. I feel like this is a look at preserving the agricultural integrity of the southwest end of the county, and that it's something that should go through the process, that should be referred, and that as we work through this, as one of the next items we'll discuss is that particular thing was sent on. We're going to look at a very amended version as we discuss it today, and I believe this is the process for making those things happen, so that we can sit down and have those discussions. The Planning Commission can give their input, the invested parties can give their input, and when it arrives back at our desk, it's probably not going to look like it does today, because it's going to go through the right process, and we're going to work to find the right solution and how we want to see this particular area of the county zoned and grow.
Okay, if we could, I wonder if, now we've kind of done our statements, maybe we could have some dialogue back and forth. I wonder if I could ask a few questions, sure. Commissioner. I've always seen the process, and I hear your side of that with let's craft a little bit different before we send it to the Planning Commission. I've always liked to see. I've always felt that as we send it to the Planning Commission, kind of on a new scale, I get, because this next one we're going to talk about here, there's a few things that I have problems with how it happened at the Planning Commission and then came back to us, in which I would like to ask them some further questions. But my main question is if we craft it, since we're the decision makers, and then we send it to the planning commission, does it not taint the planning commission?
See, and I don't think so. I guess to me, the analogy that's going through my head and to equate us to the House of Representatives in the federal government would be a stretch. But to me, what's my problem with the Republican Party right now is that they hurry and pass this health care bill that they know is dead on arrival at the Senate, right? And so, like Commissioner Ivey just said, when this comes back to our desk, it's not going to look anything like this. Well, then let's get something that, you know, let's send that, let's let them fine tune it rather than going back and forth. Because I think the frustration for a lot of these folks is you went down and met with them. Ironically, it's been 2 summers ago now. This issue's been lingering, and you've been there meeting with them. And I think a lot of the comments are frustrated because after 2 years, what have we done? You know, they're right if they say nothing, because technically we probably haven't done anything, right? So that's my problem is why would we, as the people who are in charge of the ordinance, not craft an ordinance? And I appreciate it. I mean, I don't want the planning commission to see it and say, oh, the commission did this, so therefore, I want them to be as open. That's why we've agreed in putting diversity on that panel, so that they are debating the heck out of it and changing and saying, what are those three thinking? Or, you know, and we can have that dialogue back and forth, and we hear their minutes and see why, and the residents get a chance to come, and these same people show up to planning commission, which is great because then you have new sets of ears listening and crafting. And so I do like that. I just think that, you know, especially we have a meeting today at 1 o'clock. I think it's still today, not 1 o'clock, where we're going to go and meet and talk more about this issue. I just think, you know, postponing this a week or two to refer it, you know, to craft it, because maybe, you know, in the one that we did, we've already heard back, and there were a couple little things that's like, oh yeah, well, common sense. And had we left those out, maybe, you know, it would have been a lot better. And then rather than people getting caught up, the problem for me is when they go to planning commission is they get caught up on, well, so-and-so, you're only going to allow me 10 feet, my trailer's 14 feet, right? And so sometimes that dominates a meeting when we want them to actually talk about good policy and talking about the betterment for Utah County. And if we just send it like this and it comes back totally different, and then we recraft it and say no, and then that's kind of where, for me.
So then I wonder if, and I see that point, where we as a commission, if we had an opportunity, and I'll look at Commissioner Ivey, if we had an opportunity maybe for a week to kind of go and mull it over and talk about it, there was a few things that were said here that I found counter that were happening. One, there was an assumption that all these location sections were on BLM land, and yet I thought I heard somebody say that there was some private property that was mixed in between as well. And there was some discussion on, well, is this all, you know, on public land or private land? Would it not be advantageous to maybe take a little bit? Because we do have the opportunity when we refer it back. We don't have to just refer it back like this. We could refer it back with some comments and some direction. And I think that the Planning Commission may appreciate a little bit of direction as well. Do you think that could be advantageous to do?
It certainly could be advantageous. I just feel like that we need to do something.
Yeah.
As was mentioned, this has happened for 2 years and there's been no response. I ran a campaign to try and protect the agricultural industries in this county. This is my neighborhood, and it's been frustrating prior to my time as an elected official that nothing's happened. And so, you know, sometimes you gotta prod the bull a little bit to get him to move.
And I agree with you, and that's why I say, and to me, now that we've had this meeting, and I appreciate you all coming and sacrificing your time, you know, I do get paid to listen to you and be here, and you don't, and so I appreciate your comments, I truly do. That's part of the reason why I think we should wait a week or two, because we should interject some of what we hear, because, you know, some of it is clamor or emotion, and, you know, we have to wade through and see what the emotion, to remove that emotion and say, okay, how do we make a policy so they're not emotional about it, and we can have a discussion about it, because we do want to make good policy. I know we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
and I appreciate the prodding the bull, but just to defend a little bit with our planning commission of Bryce's group, I have seen them work pretty hard on this issue on trying to do some enforcement. It hasn't been just a nothing going on. There's been a lot, not at this level. This level's a step up. So I know we met with UDOT, with Terry, and she was going down through and doing some traffic study as well, and a few things that she was trying to do.
And she actually did. They extended the slower speed zone in the Benjamin area as you approach the stop sign, but there wasn't enough traffic to actually decrease it, and that study was done very recently.
Yeah.
So
unfortunately, I think sometimes government takes a little longer than we always want, and I applaud the fact that we're moving forward. Personally, I think that in kind of taking both thoughts on this, I think we do need to go forward. I wouldn't be opposed at all if we gave it a little bit of maybe a week or so that we could run through I read it for the first time this last I guess it was just last night since I was gone last week, and there was a bunch of questions that I had in my mind as well. Just on the language itself as we refer it. But again, I am not opposed to referring it. I think that even though if we do take a week, in my mind, it is taking a week so that we can kind of clarify what exactly we'd like to see the Planning Commission focus on and do, and not that, again, for me, that it would be something in the way of stopping the process, but it would be something that I'd like to see referred maybe next week with a little more conversation.
So I don't disagree with that at all. I just know, due to calendars, I would recommend a 2-week continuance for all three of us to be able to participate in that vote. I would just.
I'll call in for that one if I have to stop on the side of the road.
Well, that's what I mean. I don't want to see us rush it, and I agree. We need to do something. I'm just saying I hope we do as we move it forward. We're moving it forward the way that we should. And to me,
I want us all to be a part of it.
So.
Okay.
Okay, well, then I would make a motion that we continue items 6 and 7 for 2 weeks for a commission meeting on September 19th. Yes.
I'll second that.
We had a motion and a second to continue items number 6 and 7 for 2 weeks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0.
Can I add a comment? And this, I'm sure, applies to all three, but I legally can't speak for all three of us. For all of you that are here or listening, please feel free to email us recommended changes, things to review. I know you made comment that it's scary to get up there. Please feel free to email us or call us, regardless of what side you are as we craft this over the next 2 weeks. That's important to all of us. So, you can email it to any one of us or all three of us, please.
Okay, moving on to item number 8. I feel like we're at halftime. Should we take a halftime break? We need a halftime break? Anybody?
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on then. Number 8 is to adopt or deny an ordinance to amend the Utah County General Plan land use map from agricultural watershed and residential, as it's stated here with the different sections and so forth, the application. If we could have, Bryce, if you'll come up and just kind of give us an overview again of what this application is, how the Planning Commission went through it. I did read their reports and their minutes, and go from there.
So this is an application that was presented by the South Utah County Community Voice. They had made an application to rezone. I think their intention was the majority of the public lands of West Mountain, state and federal lands, which comprise approximately 8,780 acres. And the proposal called for a zone change from the mining and grazing to the critical environment 2 zoning. And that required a general planned land use designation change. The CE2 zone, our critical environment 2 zone, is part of our residential land use designation. It allows for higher densities. Probably the most significant development we have in the CE2 zone is the Sundance area, kind of the mountainous areas that are subject to some of the critical protections, but also deemed appropriate for a higher density of residential use. And the current mining and grazing zone is in the agricultural designation, so that zone change necessitated also a general planned land use change. Planning Commission recommended disapproval. There were some concerns, and staff shares the concerns about the designation, proposed designation, and the potential for residential densities. I don't think that was the intention of the application, but I think it's responsible to take a look at all the potential uses in a new zone and to contemplate that. And so that was recommended for disapproval from the Planning Commission.
Can I ask you to clarify one thing that I've heard over and over when it talks about zoning? And zoning when it comes to federal land and doing that. I mean, we just barely went through a resource management plan in which this was a part of what we do. And so would you address that so that we can kind of clarify that?
So we actually have a section of our land use ordinance that does address federal public land ownership and the effect of our ordinance on those lands. And I'll just read this section from the land use ordinance. This is section 1-9 of the Utah County Land Use Ordinance. It's entitled Exemption of Government-Owned Property. Properties and land owned by districts, municipalities, counties, the state of Utah, and the United States government shall be subject to all of the provisions of this ordinance unless specifically exempted from a provision by Utah state or United States law. Moreover, any person or entity other than the state of Utah or United States government which may obtain state or United States property by purchase, lease, or other arrangement shall use such property in accordance with the provisions of this ordinance unless specifically exempted from a provision by Utah state or United States law. So in practice, community development has regulated federal lands through a lease process. We've had operations that come through our office and go through our permitting procedure. Obviously, if there's a law that exempts them from meeting our requirements, then that's something that would need to be provided, and then we'd have our attorney's office review. An example I can think of that where we don't regulate would be like a campground. You know, a campground on the Forest Service property that's run by the Forest Service. Those are uses that we don't permit or regulate. It's subject to their internal process.
Camp Williams?
Yeah, well, I don't think we've ever issued any permits at Camp Williams. So,
right.
Correct.
Well, American Fork Canyon has quite a few, too, don't they, that would fall under that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Any type of crown, and that's just kind of an easy use to kind of visualize. But for example, the cell towers on the top of West Mountain, those are all on BLM land, federal land, and those have all gone through the process. There's a number of different providers that utilize those facilities, and they've gone through our process for permitting. So, I don't know if the attorneys want to add anything else, but it's kind of community development's interpretation of that section of our land use ordinance.
So, question for you. You talked about the high density, and I read through it. It seemed like all the citizen letters, I was trying to go back through and quickly review them. I didn't see any of the citizens that sent a letter saying that they didn't support this action.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, those.
So this is kind of course, I've always kind of beat you guys up over this one. Like in Alpine, every time we talk about this, we have developers that come in here, want to develop their land, but because it's unincorporated or not in a declaration report for, you know, annexation into the city.
Yep.
This one's unique because West Mountain is not an incorporated city, which, by the way, if they want control over and not have to have the county make decisions, you could. But then you would also control this one. I know that's a hotly contested item out there. But my problem is does the Planning Commission and the staff, like, I read the staff findings report where it says, we don't agree with this because this is not in the general plan.
Right.
So to follow, and I forgot the lady's name, and I was bound and determined to remember it when she said that the zoning ordinances were written in 1940. Well, the general plan last was amended in the 70s. And that does talk about not developing in an unincorporated area. And then you hear the lady's report from Utah Foundation of 60,000 residents by 2050. I actually would like to correct her. The Kim C. Gardner has actually moved that up 10 years, so congratulations. It's actually faster than we actually think. But my question being, is the staff then only denying it because it's against our general plan? other than being against our general plan that says, you know, basically it needs to be in a declaration of annexation, the cities need to control this, you know, does it meet all the other requirements?
Well, a couple things. The general plan was reviewed and amended in 2014, and at that time, the general land use policy was maintained that there's a hierarchy of development preference in the county, and the county has continued to follow that, first and foremost in the city where services are provided. And so I think that's the fundamental principle that the staff was looking at as they contemplated this change to a residential designation. There are other factors. This is an area that is prone to natural hazards. It's in our urban wildland interface. And so as you look at the full scope of the proposed amendment and what could be allowed in that ordinance, I think there were a number of factors, but they all really relate back to a higher density of use and being subject to some of those concerns and hazards.
Which, ironically, it's funny because Utah County has cycles within cities that the county sees all the time. And just to let the residents of West Mountain in this area know, a higher density area, in 10 years, what you can expect is all your neighbors coming and complaining that you're farming at 5 a.m., that you have piles of poop. Mink farms are horrible and agriculture should be destroyed so my kids can live here. I've seen it in Lehigh. I get calls from people I went to school with that say, you know, we lived here. I'm like, that mink farm's been there for 25 years. So keep in mind, it's another balance and a delicate issue that, you know, with growth.
Sure.
So,
one thing to follow up on your question, one thing the Planning Commission did state that, I mean, I think the intent of this ordinance was to eliminate, or this land use map amendment was to eliminate the West Mountain area from these type of uses we're talking about, the earth extraction. And so that was one thing that the Planning Commission commented, saying, well, if that's maybe the intent and that's something that needs to be looked at, similar to what we just talked about, then maybe there's a different type of designation needed out there, if that's the end goal.
See, the end goal that scares me is still that 60,000 resident number, because they gotta go somewhere, which still means the orchards are being torn down. In my lifetime, I've watched Orem go from an orchard community to a community of people, so.
Yes, that's, there's definitely a conflict, and being somewhat familiar with some of how they do those projections, a lot of that is based on a number of factors, one of which is the current zoning densities in that jurisdiction. And we do have some vast stretches of RR5 zone, the Spanish Fork River bottoms, that in theory could contemplate a much higher number in the unincorporated area.
Sure.
Not specifically, you know, West Mountain, because right now that's still the RA5 zone.
Yeah, it would have to. I mean, from 2000 to 2010, excuse me, we increased 148,000 people in this county, which was the biggest growth that we'd ever had. And it's projected from 2010 to 2020, the next decade, that we're going to be at about 160,000. To hit those goals, excuse me, we're going to have to be at 220,000 in a decade.
Yeah, what's interesting is the general plan's purpose and policy of promoting that growth in the areas where the services are provided seems to be working, because the unincorporated number of residents has remained somewhat similar. And
oh yeah, under 10,000.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so we have this. Oh, Commissioner, did you want to?
I didn't have any questions. Bryce primarily addressed them. We talked about it. I think there was some for me personally, there was some unintended consequences with this type of a shift that caused me some great concern.
Okay, so before us, we have an option to adopt it or deny the ordinance to amend in number 8. Any other discussion or thoughts in direction?
Yeah, without an actual plat or something, I struggle with it, so, personally.
There should be some attachments that show the general area that was included.
Well, there's maps.
Right, I mean, we're talking about.
But what I'm saying is,
square miles.
But for me, when I've voted to go against the general plan for development and stuff like that, there's actually been plats and showing what what the use will actually be, so I can make a decision.
Yeah, the applicant just only provided the parcel maps from the recorder's office.
Yes, and that to me is kind of why I'm concerned.
Okay. Motion be in order.
I'd move a denial of the ordinance amendment as requested in regular agenda number 8.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to deny number 8 on our regular agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, number 9 is to adopt or deny an ordinance to amend section 2.2 and 3.3-25 of Utah County Land Use Ordinance, and to add requirements for earth extraction operations and so forth as stated in number 9. Bryce?
So, I don't mean to shut Bryce down, but when this one popped up and before we referred it, we had a meeting that was literally requested. That meeting's today at 1. And I apologize, I left my notes for some of the recommended changes that I think we're all in agreement with. It would be my ask that we could also continue this one for 2 weeks till after we take our tour, have a discussion. So, I mean, we can have a discussion today, but I still, you know.
In reading through this, there's a red line version, right?
Correct. There should be the most current red line version as part of your backup which was recommended from the Planning Commission.
From Planning Commission.
Correct. But that would be the version that would be before you today.
I'm not necessarily saying no on that, but I wouldn't mind having some public discussion on this, and specifically in relation to a couple questions I'd have.
If I could ask a question, Bryce, as I was reading down through this. Just a concern, because I saw the report in which there was, I think, it wasn't unanimous, was it? I think there was one.
From the Planning Commission?
Planning Commission, wasn't there one?
I believe so. I think it was 4-1.
I thought it was 4-1
Yeah.
On there. And part of my concern, and I think in going forward too, is that sometimes the Planning Commission will look at an ordinance like this, and then they'll either adopt it or deny it, but they don't really give us any alternatives. You know, they don't say, well, we like this part of it, or we didn't like that, or what if we did this, what if we modified it? And so I'm just wondering, because I was wondering why they don't do that. They need us to give them direction to do that when we refer it?
A couple of things. I think some of the reasons that I heard and I think were articulated in their motion relative to why they recommended, the majority recommended disapproval. One was related to their perceived enforceability of what was on there or what's proposed. Also, they had some questions as it related to the state's responsibility in some of these issues. At the end of the day, and I don't know if it was captured in the minutes as far as related to the motion, but they have requested staff to organize because they felt there was this issue that needs to be looked at a little, broader scope. They felt a lot of it was kind of being narrowed in on a certain operation, and so they asked that we schedule a work session to kind of take a look at the mining industry in general in Utah County. And so I think that kind of contributed to some of the members of the votes is why they recommended disapproval.
So why would we not then, as a commission, knowing some of that discussion there, and I know I read through their minutes and their notes, and there was some worry about duplication of law and so forth, and why would we not refer this back to the Planning Commission?
Oh, you certainly have that option. I think, again, the genesis of this was originally a referral from this body back to the Planning Commission with a version, and that's gone through a process. And now you have the ability to either act on their recommendation, either for or against, or also refer that back if you feel that would be merited and be the wish of the commission. I think that option's available.
Because I personally don't feel like I have enough information to make a decision on this today. I think that's I think that was one of the things that you were mentioning too, and I'm not sure where you're at with it too, but I think there needs to be work that can be done still on this. And I wouldn't have any problem referring it back to the Planning Commission too.
I think if that's the direction, it would maybe be helpful, I don't know how we can couch it, but to have it as part of the same potential referral of the new zoning designation, because it seems like these are kind of a holistic approach to this issue that we're facing. And so if it would be referred back, then maybe have companion as part of another process. But I guess that's at your discretion.
And we just need to make sure we've made some changes to it. Like some of the changes as I've reread through it, that I felt were critical, like in the hours of operation, we've created a path for pits who are operating under contract for night operations, right? If you've got to deliver your product to a road job that's happening at night, we need to make sure that they have that flexibility to deliver their product. And I think that's critical that we provide that. And from reading through here, some of that was incorporated in there. One question I'd have on this, Bryce, particularly, as we come into section D regarding dust contaminant. And I think this is a definition question for me. It talks about active in here. How are we defining active? Because for me, when I hear of an active mining operation, I'm thinking of a place where there's activity day in, day out. There are, without question, some pits in operation that are technically active, but they might have trucks in there actively operating a week out of the year, 3 days out of the year, or it's fairly dormant. And I'm concerned that we're requiring them to go in and water every single day, although nothing's happening there. Right?
Correct.
And so that would be one note that I would have there as something we need to clear up on that.
Yeah, that was
part of that. And I think we talked about that a little bit, and in this revised version, for me, that question still wasn't quite settled.
Yeah, I think
we got closer, but it wasn't all the way there.
I appreciate that. I think from our perspective as staff, you're looking at how to enforce this, and absent a more clear definition, it would be just a valid permit. And so if that's not really satisfying the intent, then I think that's something that can certainly be clarified and narrowed down on.
Okay. Again, my preference, if we could, I'd like to refer this back to the Planning Commission to clear up some of this with a little bit more work on their part and give them some flexibility to not just look at the application itself or what's there, but to give them more flexibility and say, this works, this doesn't, this is what we can do. Because it is across the entire county we're talking about. It's not just one area.
Correct.
And have some more dialogue.
So this current version would be re-referred back to the Planning Commission for further review.
Not this current version. What I would like to do is potentially refer it back. So continue this for 2 weeks after we've done that. Make some of our own recommended changes and maybe even jot them down with a couple things we'd like them to discuss and also have a discussion.
Do it with the other one is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we can give them some direction.
So in 2 weeks, we would talk about the previous ones that were referred to in this one.
And this one.
And for a potential referral back.
Potential referral back. Any other questions? Come on forward if you'd like to make a comment.
My name is Nita Birch. I live in West Mountain. You commented about the orchards in Orem closing. I lived in Orem for 20 years, and the Stratton orchards closed because they retired, and they weren't forced out from pollution from gravel pits. They retired, and that was their retirement. So that's why they closed.
No, my comment, I understand the pollution part, but they weren't the only orchards. What my point was is some of those orchards, unfortunately, we had great land and area to grow orchards in Orem too. And while Santaquin, Alberta, like that whole area is this microclimate that is so special and unique, what I'm saying is it saddens me. And again, I'm not a landowner out there. I'm just somebody who reaps the benefits of all the hard work that is put in out there. I just hope that the land is continued to be protected and farmed and produced on it like it is, and that, you know, we fight off that development that comes in and says, here's $10 million and it's more money than you can make in 5 years, and we don't get that short-sighted. And to me, that's partly what, that contributed to in Orem, and that was where my comment was, not about the other.
I'm concerned because I am concerned about danger to the area and to my children.
Sure.
So, but, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Come on forward if you'd like to make a comment on this agenda item. We are on item number 9.
Yes, my name's Jamie Evans. What I'm seeing here is that the two sides need to come together and start to work out some of the problems. And I think that's a committee that needs to work on the problems, and then they can be discussed, what can be solved and what can't. But I mean, staff has worked hard on this. I can see that they've worked hard, but they haven't brought everybody together. And somehow we need to have a committee to bring everybody together and try to get the emotion out of it and have that. That would be my recommendation, is that we get some from the industry, some from the government, and some from the residents and the people that are affected, to see if you can't come up with something better. I think that's the best way. That's just my comments.
All right, thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts in regards to these ordinances. One of the reasons why the department...
State your name again?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Julie Sainsbury, and I live out on West Mountain. One of the reasons why we discussed the South Utah County Community Voice to be for some of these ordinances is because, as was mentioned earlier, we've had a very difficult time in response from the state level to monitor air quality, dust control, traffic, berms, fire safety plans. They're there, but we are not seeing action. And not only that, we're actually being told, our department doesn't do this, call this department. Oh, we don't do that, call this department. And when the DOGM met with us, they said, in the end, it is the county that can regulate this. They can have the final say. And we kind of said, I don't think that's how the county understands it, because when I talk to county offices, my response would be, we are not responsible for the regulations. It is on a state level. So there seemed to be some confusion, and the DOGM even recommended that maybe perhaps there could be a meeting with the state and the county to clarify where this responsibility lay and how not only could regulations be in place, but how they could be enforced and followed. So
I would love to sit down with you and talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's overlap that happens at times in which you've got areas in which they do control and areas that we can control, and there's always this assumption. So I would love to have that opportunity.
That'd be wonderful. I actually have an appointment with you tomorrow at 9:15.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes. And then I just wanted to just say one thing in regards to the zoning on West Mountain, and I know this was the one before for the CE2. That basically was the best option that we had available to us at the time. This grazing zone, we are very for that. It just wasn't created before. That would adequately meet the needs. And what you have to understand is that if you don't do anything, more mines can come on West Mountain. And when is enough?
Yeah. Well, again, I think that this commission, and I assume if I speak differently, you let me know. But we applaud the fact that the citizens are involved. We love that you're here and talking, and we don't mind giving up the time and listening, to it. We decided not to have the clock sit up there and say you only have so many minutes and then you're out. type of thing. We want to hear from the citizens, and if you continue to organize, is this the first time you've put forth, a proposal like this?
It is.
It is?
Yes.
Don't give up.
We're learning.
Keep going. There's things you'll learn
So-
from it, and keep going. Don't say, oh, we lost on that one, so we disband or whatever. Keep going. There's good things that come about with
He's
citizens
referring
being
to
involved.
he's referring to 8, not the other one. We haven't made a decision.
Oh, yes.
I could see
No,
the kind
I
of look in your
understand.
eye like,
Yeah.
what are they doing?
Yeah,
No, I
don't give up.
understand.
Keep
Yeah.
going.
No, we will not give up because it's very important.
Yes.
And it's worth the work and effort and everything that we need to do to see it happen. So appreciate your work on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, pardon me. My name is Dave Callis. I represent Clyde Companies, and we're at 730 North, 1500 West in Orem. Just wanted to, and I know we'll have an opportunity to speak at another time, but wanted to briefly comment about the proposed ordinance. Clyde Companies, of course, as some of you know, operates or owns Geneva Rock Products, Sunrock Corporation, and WW Clyde, among others, that own and utilize gravel pits here in Utah County. And we have about 3,000 employees in and around the county that operate out of those properties. Our products are used all over. You drove here on our product to get to this meeting, and this building you're standing in was made from that gravel from those pits. The ordinance, sitting here throughout the meeting, it's clear to me that there's a specific area that may be a problem or a concern, and so the solution that we're looking at is a solution that is addressing the entire county rather than maybe one area where there's a problem. That's challenging for us where we're operating in multiple locations. We have Geneva Rock Products alone in the last couple of years has invested over $30 million in environmental issues, including dust suppression, property improvements, recycling, and other practices to improve our stewardship of the environment and to mitigate dust and other issues. And while we don't operate currently on West Mountain, we are throughout the county. We do have other properties that would be impacted by this. And so there are some concerns, even in the second version. I know there's been some changes made. There is still a few concerns we'd have. We'd love to talk about those. But I think most importantly, the point I would make is that it's important to note we are heavily regulated. Our industry, the agency that primarily we interact with is not DOGM, it's the Department of Environmental Quality. And so they regulate what kind of emissions, including fugitive dust, can leave the property. And so they don't say you have to pave your entrance of your pit, or they don't say you have to use sprinklers. So what they say is, here's your limit. Here's the area where how much dust you can release. And then they say, here is a menu of options. You can go and do what works best on that particular property, in that kind of geography. Is it a pit? Is it a mountain? What is it you're using? Because all of those tools are used differently. And so they regulate that, and we go and pick which ones work best, because some of them will work in one area and won't work in another. So in this ordinance, what I'd say is the first edited portion says that in paragraph 11, you will follow gravel pits, you will follow the Department of Environmental Quality laws. To me, that's succinct. That should be the ordinance. Beyond that, we're sort of stacking regulations on top of that. And so while DEQ may not say you need to spray, with water this pile of gravel, they have given us other options to use. This ordinance is now narrowing that down. And so some of these options we're being asked to or forced to do here may not be effective. Anyway, I'm looking forward to a chance to explain this in further and hopefully answer some of your questions at that point. Thanks.
Just a comment on that. I want to publicly thank Clyde Companies and Jamie Evans. When this all originally started, you were the two who reached out and been proactive in trying to get the verbiage in this right. The legislative process is difficult, trying to balance rights and protect individuals and not get too restrictive in regulation, but protecting the life and safety of individuals is a challenge. But both of you have been phenomenal about reaching out and trying to work through this process to get to a better balance. And I really appreciate that. And ironically, your guys' are the pits that I drive by and there's no dust and they're properly run. So for whatever it's worth, but do recognize I appreciate your efforts in that regard.
Great, thank you.
It's funny because Public Works keep telling me Jamie's dust is why their place is so dirty.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Daly. I'm the Environmental Director for Staker Parson Companies. And as well, I would also echo the opportunity to work with the public on a stakeholder basis, to work with the Planning Commission, to get everybody on the same page. I've seen success in this, for example, in southern Utah, where they have they call it the Southern Utah Air Quality Task Force, that they have the public come in, they have regulators come in, they have DEQ come in, they have Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining come in, and they all sit and talk about the various issues that they're facing down there in the St. George area. So, and it has been very productive. Do site visits, show the folks what entails on our operations and the things that we're up against, and then we can also hear and work with the public.
Who organized that, just so I know?
That's actually organized through the AGC.
Okay.
So Rich Thorne, he spoke at the Planning Commission last, was it a couple weeks ago?
One who's out of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they saw some issues down there. They wanted to be able to meet together, and they have some other companies, Quality Rock, I think Sunrock's down there. And it's been very effective. And it gives everybody a chance to come and meet. We actually meet at the AGC office down in southern Utah. It's been very, very helpful. So I would recommend going forward on that. And at the same time, the conditions that have been recommended in this part, this number 9, the 1 mile radius, I would just strike that. I don't know how that came up with. I think staff even said that there was not even a scientific basis for doing that. I don't know how that effective. Hours of operation are always a hard one. I can speak for Staker Parson Companies that when we make material, or when we're making materials for demand, and it's because we have to, we don't want to make big piles of rock to not sell and to not go into road projects or construction projects. So if we have to have the hours to do that, then that's required to get the projects done, especially UDOT is very stringent and requirements a lot of night work. And so we would be probably almost every hearing coming in asking for extra hours. So I would just say that I know the operators, they don't want to spend more energy than they have to make rock and concrete and that. So I would just say that would probably be a good thing to take away. Landscaping, the way that the landscaping part is written in there, I think it's pretty ambiguous. It'd be hard to define and enforce what you mean by the landscaping, or to provide a barrier, what it states in there. What does a barrier look like? I agree that landscaping is important too. It's a good community outreach for an operation like ours. I agree with that, but does it necessarily need to be green or watered? It can be done with rock and xeriscaping and stuff like that that looks good. Just a couple more. There was a mention that they should call for the dust control to provide a wheel wash station or a washout station. Those are problematic. Sometimes they don't work that well, and they have to be heavily maintained. You actually have to have more area, and you use quite a bit of water. If you have the ability to keep the dust down by vacuuming the paved roads, or keeping them wet, or putting mag chloride or chemical dust suppression on the roads, works just as well. And I think, I don't have my glasses, but I think it's E for the lighting. It says they want us to minimize what's coming off of our facilities. I totally agree. We don't want to affect what the light pollution, but what does a minimize mean? So I would just, there's a lot of things that need to be tightened up. We're more than happy to sit down and tighten that up with different folks. Our big community outreach part of our company is to be a good neighbor, and we realize that we operate under the community right to operate given by you guys and by the public. So we value that. We know that that's an important part of operating anywhere we are. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so we're still on number 9. And are we at a point where we can, is there any other comments? I don't see any other.
I'll move then that we continue item 9 for 2 weeks till September 19th.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to continue number 9 on the regular agenda for 2 weeks.
Hold on, before I make the motion, here's my question. If we would like to refer it, or we're gonna make changes, would we be better striking it or denying it in its current form?
Well, we could just, we could.
Do that
I
at
think
that
the
time.
thing is we want to refer them all together as a
Right.
package.
Right, but, yes.
We can, yeah. And we can go through and work through the verbiage and
Yeah, I just
get
wanna
this
make sure it's
changed and then send
the
it.
best action to give us what we've been talking about. So, okay.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second to continue this for 2 weeks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. All right, number 11. Number 11 is to approve and authorize the commission chair to execute an agreement with Vineyard City for law enforcement services. This has been continued. Thank you for coming.
Questions are probably more to legal. I don't have a changed document on here for,
You do not have a change document.
okay,
So we have some, the sheriff actually was able to provide some more historical information for you that I think will be beneficial, as well as I have had a conversation with Court Griffin. I apologize, Lieutenant Yvette Rice with Utah County Sheriff's Office.
I know.
Sorry. He specifically, as one of your points of concern 2 weeks ago, Commissioner Graves, was the rebate from the court operation, right? So with regard to Vineyard City specifically, and we had a lengthy conversation, Court Griffin and I, his concern was that if our agreement now is a true and actual cost-based agreement, that in essence, not giving them that rebate, we are actually making money off of them. So he has a concern there. But that also, we further discussed the smaller cities. And one of your other issues that you brought forward 2 weeks ago was the concern that we do heavily subsidize our contract cities. With regard to our small contract cities who don't have even a full-time officer, yeah, I do agree that we do. And he felt that if we were going to take away a tax credit, or excuse me, a court credit, that court rebate, it might be more appropriate to do so for the smaller cities because we are actually subsidizing them.
Well, and then on top of that, Sheriff Tracy, the issue also is work product. I mean, we're providing a service for them. That work is done in the city, in the confines of the city for the city. So the generation of fines and forfeitures from citations is part of the work product that we're supplying to that city. And then it also falls under some of the state regulations as far as how that money's split out, who does the prosecution, who issues the citations. There are some state rules that come along that same side. And the other issue on the smaller cities
but
is
hold on to that question real quick. What attorneys, or whose office of attorneys does that side of the court? Isn't it the county?
Well, it depends on, some of the cities have their own, some have the county that do that.
Right,
Most
so
of
on
our
the ones that have the
contract-
county, if
Right.
we're giving them all the money, then we're subsidizing that portion. We shouldn't be giving them that credit. That's what I'm talking about. To me,
'Cause that's what
it's-
Jeff told us last time.
Right. So to me, all I'm saying is whatever 100% of the county's cost is to run that is what we should recoup.
And I don't disagree. Like I said, I mean, GASB requires that as far as,
But that's not what we're
accountability.
currently doing with these contracts. We're giving them
the credit.
Yes.
And then billing
Credit
back to
and the
thing.
attorneys are not
Charging.
charging.
And well, that could be fixed as far as the attorney's side, and it should be fixed, I would assume. But I don't know how to calculate that part,
I don't
honestly.
either.
But again, I think that's something that we probably ought to sit down and have the conversations on. But as far as the other issue, to the other point of the smaller cities of your Goshen and your Genola, or not Genola,
Fairfield.
Fairfield and that.
Cedar Fort.
If they opt out of a contract with this, then we're required to supply law enforcement anyway. That's the problem. It's problematic. Now, we can limit
But
that to,
in that case, we would still get 100% of the court stuff.
that's true, we would, because then we would be generating work product for, in behalf of ourselves, not a contract.
Right.
But also the issue of the law enforcement contract in those cities, we would be required to provide them some type of law enforcement. We would scale that back, and they would not get some of the other things, like animal control and those kinds of things, and you would probably limit it to felony calls and those kinds of.
Yeah, my only
work.
concern with all these contracts really has been the county, again, I'm not trying to make money on any of these
I
guys.
understand.
We're just trying to cover our budget because, you know, as our budget keeps climbing every year and cities keep asking us to do more and more, we just always have to take a look. Now, ironically, I also understand that from the sheriff's office, we're always going to be a year behind. We're going to set the price, and then, and I understand that. We're really collecting 2017 money on 2016 prices, and I'm okay with that cycle because it just is what it is.
Well, because of the differences in
Right.
in how the budgets are set and when they're
Right.
set. But again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that we do this every year and recalculate those costs. We can do that as soon as your budget is set in December, so that we can make sure that we minimize that gap by being able to give the cities the correct information for their budget process that starts in February and then starts payment in July.
Yeah, so my concern with, again, and I don't, from going to your issue, your statement, I don't want us making money on it. But I still think that if we control the citation credit on it, then since we're the ones that are doing both sides of this, we're doing the whole thing with it. We're collecting it, we've got the legal part of it, everything's Utah County. Then the citation credit, when we do the true up, we can take that into account and say, what would they, what should they get, or what was the actual cost all the way through? What was the cost that we had, and what was extra, then could be credited back to them. But if we give them the credit right off, then we bear the brunt in the end of saying, well, now what's the actual cost? And I don't even know if we take into account what the citation credits were, because we just have already given them the citation credit.
Well, again, I think it's something we should look at. I would hate to change the system before we have something to implement in its place. That's my concern, is that we just withhold the credits, and where do we put that money? How do we true it up at the end of the year? We ought to have something in place before we go forward with the wholesale change of just starting to keep the citation credits. Again, I think there's some of the legal issues I'd like to have a conversation with the county attorney on, just based on what is work product. I mean, what percentage of that would we give them? Because yes, the county is generating those stops, but they're doing it for and in behalf of a service they're paying for. So, I mean, there is work product there that should come to the city.
I have learned through a different agreement that our civil division chief, if he attends 4 meetings a year for about an hour, it's worth about 10% of the salary, so it could be expensive for you.
Again, I think that's something that we need to come to a conclusion on, so that we can have something proposed to them. But I hate to hold up this vineyard contract, because they need the help.
How long does it take to get that worked out, though?
I don't know.
Well, if we hold up the contract, then that will give us time to work on it with some sort of fire. Otherwise, it goes into next year and then the next year.
Well, no, because this agreement's through 2023. That was kind of the concern, was how do we address it if we pass a thing that's good for 5 years or you know what I mean?
I understand that. Again, though, the agreement does say that we will recoup our costs. So I think it's built into there that we make those changes based on the new cost.
To answer that question, Court Griffin County Attorney's Office, to answer that question, there's a 90-day out clause in the contract, so.
Well,
it does have a 5-year term.
But the problem is when we say that acts like we want to enter an agreement and we're considering pulling out. That's not what we're talking about. We're fine providing service to Vineyard. I mean, and the other contract cities. What we're saying is we don't want to enact a 90-day clause, pull out, make it look like we're unhappy with Vineyard City, when all we're trying to do is make sure Vineyard City is 100% on board and we're 100% on board financially,
Yeah.
right? That's where we're trying to find the balance. It's not that we're against contract cities and Vineyard particularly at all.
Well, I politically, I just don't think that it's wise to do that, in the sense that we enter a contract, and now all of a sudden they're saying Utah County wants to pull out of the contract that we entered into because now they want to change the contract. I would rather just have it all worked out at the very beginning.
Because it says the true up, and I remember last year, Chris Pengrib at Eagle Mountain calling me and telling me, if you're gonna impose that much money on me, I can't afford it. And my answer to him was, Chris, that agreement was clearly stated, and this is our cost. We just hadn't done a true up for a couple of years, and so it seems like a lot. And so that's the other side. If we don't get them done right, then the mayors may have inherited a contract or come in and say to us, hey, what in the heck are you bozos trying to charge me another $25,000 for? And it's like,
That's why I state, I think these should be done annually and we should set a program with dates in place so that it works for us.
Sure.
Within when we adjust our costs at the end of the year, going into the next year, and that we can minimize that gap, because there's always gonna be a gap because we're not on the same financial calendar. And so there's no way for us to increase our costs in January and pass them on to a contract that goes from June to July for them.
okay, so I guess we adopt a budget, and let's say we're right up against the deadline on December 31st. That's by law the last day we can do it, right? Within 31 days or by January 31st, could you then have, because we should have budgeted what our cost is, and I know we do the adjustments as far as, we average certain things and aspects, and that's fine because I haven't seen a better way to do it. But if we do that by January 31st, can't we, by January 31st, have that done so that we can then issue to the cities and say, FYI, this will be your new contract price, and,
starting in February or
well,
talking in July?
Whenever that financial thing goes, right? So in the current contract, that's part of the problem is I don't see when it says we true up.
Yeah,
are we truing up going into the next contract?
Part of the true up is also a look back.
That's my point, but that's what I mean, are we allowing the cities to absorb that in their next year policies, or are we literally saying to the cities, come July 1st, you owe us a check for the back year? And that's not what's in that contract, and that's part of what will help us internally for our true up process. Does that make sense?
I agree. And those are the things that have never been clear to anybody.
Sure.
So lacking that, all we've ever done is implemented the new cost in July.
Right.
Right.
Based on.
Based on best guess, because you don't hear from the attorneys or whoever.
So with the conversation we had a few weeks ago with Mike Brower, there's, with Eagle Mountain, it looks like there's $100,000 to $200,000 difference. Now that depends on how you look at it, how you work it. But are we gonna recoup that cost? Probably not. It's gonna wind up, so we lose that part of it as we say, here's our new rate for the next year. And if our new rate for the next year doesn't work out to where it comes to a close as we can to a zero, then we either lose again or we're over. But I'll tell you, if we were $200,000 over, the mayor's be knocking on our doors.
That's right.
Oh, no doubt.
See, and I can get comfortable with where on July 1st, which is when the cities implement their budget, that they adjust and refund us, even if it's over their 12 payment. I don't know how they pay, whether it's monthly or annually. I have no idea, honestly. I just know that they pay, because otherwise I'd hear.
They're billed monthly.
Monthly, okay. So if we added to the bill the monthly, the increase based on the rates and the previous year's shortage, or if there's a credit, they get a credit, right? Either way, and that on July 1st, that's part of the adjusted rate, I'm okay with that, because again, but that way there's an accountability for when the true up happens. They can say, because they may request, or certain things happen and all of a sudden they request all sorts of overtime. And so, it could get pricey based on their
again,
request.
Overtime doesn't
I
count
know.
unless they add it. But one of the things I think that we need to make sure is a level playing field is that if there are unexpended monies within other parts of our budget, then that ought to be going back as a credit to them.
I agree.
That hasn't happened in the past. So I think that's something that should be looked at when you're doing a true up. You really look at both sides and truly, deduct what hasn't been spent, that we had in the budget that didn't for some reason get expended in some of those areas. And sometimes it's been significant, other times it's been
Sure.
nothing.
Well, and I agree. And to me, like I say, using the average formula, so what I would say is if it's the civil division, and I don't know that it is, who does this, right? I would take the average salary based like you guys do for the level of whether it's an attorney two or whatever and did that, and then ask how many hours they're really doing it and apply that same standard.
And yeah, and usually we've gone with the mean average.
Right.
On because we have younger and older employees.
That's right. And it's close enough that to me, I can feel comfortable. It's about as good as I think we can get unless, like I say, I'm open to if we have more exact ways. So,
Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we have suggested through this process, if I remember right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Yvette, that April is the date, April 1 is the date that we need to give the cities any increased costs or anything each year.
Written notice of increase.
Yeah, written notice of increase. And I would just suggest on the true-up that that also be part of that process. Then the cities can be aware of it, working between April and their June 30th adoption of their fiscal year budget. And then at that point, we move forward with the new rate for increased insurance costs, benefits, et cetera, and also the true-up costs, and they can go ahead and plan for that. As far as I understand, any of these additional true-up costs, of course, if there's something that we identify and we owe them a credit, we'd apply it. But most of the true-up costs are just things, unexpected expenses or things that were overlooked that should be addressed. And the contracts, Court can correct me if I'm wrong, but the contracts do say, for the most part, that we have the opportunity to make sure that we are reimbursed for the expenses that we put out.
right.
So, in short, I think as long as we just make it a practice that with that April 1 increased cost, we also do the true-up, have it all prepared by April 1, that we can handle this situation fairly smoothly.
Well, let me ask you a question on the citation credits then. It sounds like it doesn't matter where the citation credits are given. If it's given to the city or if we hold the money, as long as the true-up process is included as we look at everything involved, meaning the.
As long as that is factored into the true-up.
As long as that's
process.
factored into the true-up as well, and if that's factored, I mean, I'd be fine with what we have before us if we had some sort of language in there that said that all those things are factored into the true-up.
Addressed in the true-up.
Addressed into the true-up. So if we give them a credit, that credit is factored in there as part of it. And then we have our exact costs that we're looking down through it, even with the attorney's cost as well. And then we have
I believe, if I guess I'm maybe mistaken, but I guess the attorney's cost has not been taken out in the past?
That's what Jeff told us last time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to look into that, but,
Sure.
I mean, I thought that was something that was set by.
That was new to us.
Well, it wouldn't be set by you anyway.
No,
And
it was
that's
set
part of
by
the concern.
somebody else some other time.
And that's part of my
hadn't
concern is all of a sudden when you hear it. But the only thing I would ask is the April 1st deadline, I agree with. I would say internally, March 1st is when our discussion needs to happen because March 25th starts to get really.
In fact,
I was thinking February.
Yeah.
Yeah, as early as possible.
Yeah, agreed.
Most definitely, because I understand by contract, we're obligated to get the cities by April 1st. So
Yes.
Right.
internally, we
Right.
should be working.
Well,
on
especially
this.
because I'm thinking of inside your office because of the delay in the tax collection, the end of the year really starts in March. And so I think if we can do internally that beforehand so that your office can focus on end of year
We ought to
numbers.
have it in February. We really
Yeah.
should. Because a lot of those cities start pressuring us for stuff in February anyway, because they are like we are. We start in August and.
Yeah.
and
They're
we don't
planning
do-
forward.
They're starting in February for June.
Yeah.
End of June.
So Court, then, do we have language in here that is sufficient to accomplish what we're talking about, or do we need to modify so that we capture what we're saying?
The contract will have to be modified to do that. The only true-up language relates to overtime costs. So we will need to modify the agreement.
Okay. Hey, if you would make that change, can we get this on the agenda for next week?
Well, we'd have to get it to Vineyard first, so.
Okay,
not-
so if we say 2 weeks.
Well, we can, why couldn't we pass it and send it to them?
On their approval.
Yeah.
We can do
Well,
it either way.
we could, but
I'm asking if you can get the contract amended inside of a week. The worst case is they send it back to us with a recommended change and we revote, right?
yeah. Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
So is a week enough? That's my question to you.
Let's go 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, and just a clarification, when we're talking about true up, we're talking about actual expenses, the actual revenues. And the only way the budget comes into this is the cities are setting their budget.
Right.
That's why we use that term budget. But it's really, the true up is just actual expenses
Actual expenses.
to
Yes.
actual revenues in that. And then, of course,
Across the whole board.
yeah,
Yes.
across the board for the city during that period of time. And then the other thing is we also need to make sure we understand where we're at with this credit, as far as the citation credit, as to what the expenses are and what the,
Yeah, and that'll have to be in the hill.
yeah, so that's something you'll have to look at.
So could
Yeah.
that be added in, additional language, could that be added into the agreement to talk about that will be part of the true-up process, the factoring of the citation credit annually?
Yes.
Because I don't know, I mean, it's just like us, I don't know that we'd care if we entered into an agreement if they said, hey, you owe $100,000 a year. Well, by the way, you've got a credit, now you only owe 75,000. Whether we get it all in lump sum and then we pay it over, but if they care, then I guess we can talk about that.
And I also might mention that I believe the overtime is already calculated in the monthly billings, so.
That's, the overtime is in addition to.
Right, but then on the billings that go out, it's
Up to
already
7%,
accounted for.
wasn't it 7%? And then you have to talk with the
But
city.
they see it and they get to approve that. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will move, are we ready for a motion?
One
Oh,
other,
oh, yeah.
you guys had one other issue, and that was, you had a question that quite frankly got me off guard, and that was about long-term disability.
Oh, yeah.
So the sheriff has a lot of specific information that he can talk to you about that. I mentioned that a lot of the historical information behind these agreements, I don't have. I've been here for 27 years next week, but I still don't understand where some of these clauses came from, and court will tell you the same thing. He's been here for a long time, like
Sure.
I have. The sheriff is probably the longest standing official that we
He's
have in
still
the
standing.
county, so
I'm not
he has a
standing
lot
still.
of.
It's just good to see him without a boot. I got so used to the
Yeah.
boot that he,
Well, as far as the issue of the long-term disability, we factored that in about 2, maybe 3 years ago. That was a specific thing that came up from the commission again, and we went back to Deneen, and we actually factored that in, and that went back into the formula that we do the annual.
okay, so then
yearly-
every year we need to make sure we're looking at our insurance costs too.
That's correct.
Okay.
Again,
That
just
makes
as one
sense.
of the things that we should be doing when we're looking at the formula, you take that cost, plug it into the formula, you get the weighted unit, basically of what a man costs for a deputy 3 versus a detective and all that.
So do you have that? How we did that, how it was done in the past? You said it was weighted in.
It was weighted in as part of the factor on the formula, and I can go back up and get with Deneen and.
So,
Find that.
okay,
for that.
so.
To see if we're still doing
This
it.
may or may
Yes,
not
I'm sure
make
we are.
sense.
Okay.
To my fellow commissioners, but, so if I'm picturing right on Deneen's big spreadsheet, there's like, we take the salary, and here, you can see I'm visualizing it, and then we have like this 58.6% of benefits.
And then
Is
there
it in
were-
that benefits portion?
Then there
No.
were line-specific other things. that were
Okay,
there
it's in
too.
the other one,
And
okay.
it's either, it's in one of the two.
Should be,
And I can
okay.
go back and check and find out where it is, but it was specifically added in.
We actually bill for a number of deputies out there and a cost. How that cost was calculated, I don't know, and it's not on my spreadsheet, but on our bill to them, we actually
Okay.
So we
separate
can
it
go
out.
back, we can go back and,
It is still
and make
being
sure
done.
that that's
It is
not
still
just an
being
old number, that it's being changed every year.
Mr.
accordingly.
Chairman?
Yeah.
I may point out that since 2008, the first year, or that would be the second year I was here,
Right.
that actually the calculations of all these rates and everything have been left up to the sheriff's office, public safety. They've laid out all the rates. We've just quickly reviewed them, but my staff and I have not been involved because back in 2007, there was questions about how we were applying overhead and everything, and we did step back and just say, okay, you guys go ahead and do it, you calculate it. So all those calculations, all those expenses have been left up to the sheriff's office. So whatever's in your spreadsheet and your calculations
But-
is what it is.
Sure, but what I hear him saying is, how would he ever know what our insurance, like, so I think if the commission is gonna impose this, I think what the commission needs to do is then go to CAMI or whoever at HR and
yeah.
say, what is this cost? And then we will plug that into their line on their spreadsheet and make sure it's accountable, right?
Yeah, and so I think as you guys calculate the spreadsheet, or as you pull all that together.
Yeah, we pull the numbers from whoever has the information.
Yeah, so you just tap into the appropriate resources.
So a
Same
deputy,
thing for vehicles, the same thing for everything. We go to the county, Public Works for that, because we
Yeah.
don't have those numbers.
yeah, so a deputy, a regular deputy, if I can call it that, if that's the correct term, regular deputy versus a contract deputy, they're gonna look different when you go across, because the contract deputy will probably have a higher number in there because they're doing the long-term disability that goes with the city. Is that correct?
Well, no. The cost to the county is the same. So what they do is they say, okay, if you're a deputy one, right? They take all the deputy ones and they take all the salaries from all the deputy ones combined and divide it so we get an average. So we have an average. So it doesn't matter if they transfer and move assignments in a year, that average still basically encompasses. Every deputy still gets charged the same for disability, retirement, and so that's already encumbered. What he's saying is we break that out, whatever that line item is. See, in their budget, when we give it to them into that 1,300 or whatever, it's already there. When we do the contract cities, we need to give him that specific number, what the average is for those people.
That's good.
And I just wanted to clarify on the insurance provided for in the contract, that's just liability insurance. It does not include disability, so.
Right, but what we're saying is we put that cost in there because we do incur a potential liability of disability.
So 2 weeks, what are we?
Yeah, no,
Or
September
what are we waiting
19th
for?
is what my motion is going to be. That way we can have court get that done and take that vote. So I will move then that we continue item 11 till, for 2 weeks.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to continue item number 11 for 2 weeks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. And probably just on a note, I think we would like court to look at the rest of the contracts too that we already have out there and possibly amend them to match. Okay. We are done with, well, no, we're not. We got closed meetings, we got, what closed, I guess we need every single one of them.
Do we?
I think we need every single one of them, don't we? We have, there's a gentleman here that has come from out of state to meet with us. Where is he at? Is he still here with us? On a closed meeting? I wonder if he's out in the hall.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do every one of them.
Okay, I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, water rights, or water shares for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session items.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated number 14. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the sale of real property, water rights, or water shares previously publicly noticed for sale for today's date at this location following the completion of regular agenda and work session items.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated number 15. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals for this date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session items.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated number 16. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session items.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated number 17 on our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. We have 2 work session items. Are these work session items,
They're time sensitive.
Are they time sensitive?
Can they be postponed a week?
Please?
Yes.
Number 2 would be fine. I don't know, Carl, I don't know what Paul's set up.
Can we wait a week?
We can? Okay.
Will you not be here? So should we go 2 weeks for you?
I have things every Tuesday morning, so I actually.
Okay, well, we have a 1 o'clock meeting, so.
We'll work something out.
Actually, if we put you in 2 weeks, it's gonna be long again, because my guess is some of these folks will show up, so 1 week or 3 weeks, what you pick? 1 week, okay.
All right, let's move them.
Okay, so we'll do 1 in 1 week, and we'll do both in 2 weeks.
we do them both in 1 week, though? That way we're not bumping up against the other.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yeah, next week.
Do we need a motion to move work session? Do we need a motion to move work session? Okay, I'll move that we continue work session items 1 and 2 for 1 week.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to continue work sessions item number 1 and 2 for 2 weeks, or 1 week. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. We'll move into our closed meetings. Thank you.